Hey man, how's it going?
It's going well. How's it going in America?
Going with you? Yeah, in America. Nice setup you got there.
Thank you.
It's
One
very good
tries.
camera. Really nice. Got beautiful light on your skin.
Yeah, it's for the YouTube.
It's for the YouTube.
Yeah, we're on
Oh,
here making content.
oh, nice, dude. About Israel in particular?
Israel, jihad, Islam, terrorism, Nazism, the
Nazism.
usual.
I mean, here it is crazy. Like, I find that like when I talk to people about, anti-Semitism and stuff like that, it's like I want to reassure my Jewish friends that like it's not so bad. But then when I come here, I'm like, oh my God, people are
No,
saying
it's whatever you
they're
think it
out in the
is. If you think it's
world.
here, it's like it's off the chart. I've been doing this for a decade. It's like spiraling. Most Jews
I
are
mean,
oblivious.
I guess like my hope is that like this is a self-selecting group of people. These are the loneliest, except for you. You're doing this for content, but most people here are so lonely and alienated that will attract the most sort of like fringe people in a society. I hope it's not a
I
representative
think I think
sample.
I make content on the streets, and it's exactly the same sentiment. Yeah, unfortunately, Jew hate is spiking, but Baruch Hashem, thank God the Jewish people have a country and a military that can defend us for the first time in 2,000 years. So let
You
them
think
hate.
like I live in New York where there's a lot of Jews, and I always hear about Israel. It's like we're under existential threat. So I'm always like, well, that's a bad deal for Jews. Like they're much safer anywhere else than they are when they're under existential
Ah no,
threat for
so I
7 years.
moved. I grew up in the UK, lived in the UK my entire adult life. I moved here 2 years ago after October 7th. Moved in the
Yeah.
middle of a war, experienced Iranian missiles falling on my country. Spent many a night with my kids in the bomb shelter.
Yeah.
Witnessed terror attacks 5 minutes from my house, and feel far safer here than in the UK. In the UK, I had knives pulled on me. A terrorist came into my local kosher supermarket, tried to stab Jews, and didn't spend a day in jail.
What?
In the West, Jew hate is given a stamp of approval. Governments don't know how to handle it because it largely comes from another minority community, and they don't know how to deal with inter-minority prejudice.
Hmm.
And as a consequence, Jews are vulnerable. Jews are vulnerable in America. Jews are vulnerable in the UK. Jews are vulnerable in Canada. Here, there is a real existential threat. There's lots of people that want to kill us. The difference is there is a military and a security service that will move mountains to keep my children safe. We've never felt safer.
Yeah, but I mean, like, here in New York, we have a very funny sort of situation, which is the crime statistics are at the lowest that they've been in like 80 years or something, right? It's like the rates of murder, the lowest it's ever been, rates of robbery, armed assault, all this thing, like all like super historically low numbers. But if you ask the sentiment of the people, they're like, oh my God, New York is so unsafe. It's like there's crime everywhere. There's sometimes a disjunction between people's feelings and the actual statistics,
Well,
you know? And
I know the FBI statistics on anti-Semitism, and they're the highest they've ever been in America.
well, I mean, I guess what I'm saying more is just like how people here in New York are not thinking about terrorism or anything like that, right? They're thinking about like street violence and murder
Yeah.
and like those that they're concerned about. Had one major terrorist attack in the entire history of this country. So it's like when they're talking about it being unsafe here, what they're talking about is that they're afraid they're going to get shot, killed, mugged, or stabbed. But they're not responding to a statistical reality. They're responding to a media reality, which is telling them with as much energy as it can that they're actually like crazy people everywhere, and you're gonna get pushed on the subway and you're gonna get set on fire.
So,
But statistically it's not true. And so for me, when I think about Israel and people who feel very safe there, I'm like, well, statistically, if we just go by the numbers of people killed, more Jews have been killed in Israel since its founding than anywhere else, right? Even if we take October 7th off the map, right, and we just say like since the founding of Israel, where is the place where most Jews have been targeted for being Jews and killed? It's Israel 100%.
and there's a very, very simple explanation for that. Because
Well,
wherever regimes have risen up to slaughter their Jews, like the Arab world, the Israel nation of Israel has taken in their refugees. A million
no,
Jews fled the Muslim world, the Farhud,
but
the Aqsa. So yeah, you was.
No, I mean the history is correct that the Jews of the Middle East left the Middle East. A lot of them were forced out of the Middle East by violence and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it's also true that the Israeli state saw it as essential that the Middle Eastern Jews move to Israel because without it, they would never have the demographic majorities that they needed. Right now, more than half of the people of Israel are of Mizrahim descent. Right? It's like without those people there, right? Israel is not a viable
So
state
are
without
you
it.
saying that? Sorry, I'm lost in your argument.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I'm
Yeah.
saying that Muslims slaughtered Jews and Israel gave them a place of sanctuary, a place of refuge. I think you're
Yes.
agreeing with that.
No, I guess what I'm saying is that the while the Jews that lived in the Middle East like suffered a dimitude and occasional bouts of violence, I would have chosen to be a Jew in any Arab land for 800 to the year 1945 over being in any Christian land. And the Jews
Really?
that
So
lived.
you'd have chosen to live under the Al Muhadun rather than under
No,
King
of course not.
Kashmir
I'm a
of
humanist,
Poland?
so I don't believe anybody should live under second class citizenship. But
No,
second
no,
class
but
citizenship.
I'm saying like the Al Muhadun slaughtered Al Muhadun from the Maghreb, from the North Africa, slaughtered far more Jews than say
Right, but I
King
mean, Jews have
Kashmir.
sought safety historically all over the world,
So,
and what I'm
so,
saying is that
so
they're safer. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but my sense, obviously, you have a better sense than I am, but just looking at the numbers, the Jews that went not to Israel ended up safer than the Jews that went to Israel,
So it's
right?
the other way
But
around. It's the other way. So this is what many people in the West fail to.
yeah,
Israel
yeah,
is a protection for the Jewish people. So historically, so I know you can make your grimacing faces, but historically, when Jews were slaughtered by tyrants, they had to beg non-Jews for protection. They'd go
yeah.
to a sympathetic Christian country, a sympathetic Muslim country, and beg for protection. And then we'd enter this sick cycle where maybe we'd have a good Khalifa, a good Sultan. Maybe we'd have a good king, but then they'd be replaced by a tyrant who'd increase the taxes, increase the burdens, start persecuting Jews. And so the cycle repeated. We flee from that country to another. And our security was depended on the benevolence of some unrelated ruler who was usually ruling in their own self-interest. They wanted, say, an educated class of banking who could help collect taxing or whatever value that Jewish community could bring to their nation. It was a self-serving interest. And then when the debts mounted up too high, they turned on the Jews and chased them out again. And so we were dependent on others to save us. Today, Israel, the Jewish people, save ourselves. And so when
Well,
tyrants rise up in Iraq, when tyrants rise up in Algeria, when tyrants rise up in Libya, in Egypt, in any of these nations,
yeah.
in Yemen, the last Jewish community of Yemen just fled recently, a few years ago. There's not one Jew left there. It's one of the most ancient, or was one of the most ancient Jewish civilizations.
But
And they fled. Where did they flee? To Israel. Why? Because here there's an army that will protect them. So never again they have to go cap in hand to some non-Jewish entity begging for protection.
I
And
mean, they
so,
but historically they did though, right? Like
and
historically.
exactly, and that's what Israel is
Well,
putting
when
into.
they went and then they could have knocked on England's door, but England wasn't going to open its doors. It was going to open its colony's door, right? It
No,
wasn't
England did open it, sir.
when.
So the Jews were readmitted long before the state of Israel was re-established, or the colonies.
Well, yes, Aliyahs began before the British mandate took over, no doubt. But the creation of this sanctuary for Jewish protection,
Britain
with
didn't create Israel.
Britain, of course, created Israel. What do you
No,
mean?
it didn't. Britain abstained from the 1947 United Nations vote. There was a civil war here. The Jews were fighting the British.
But like you do understand that even before Zionism, the British already had plans to move the Jews to
You're
Palestine.
talking the night? No, the British didn't. What you have was the 1917
No, before that,
Balfour.
before that.
No, there's nothing before that. So
Before that, there's Lord Shaftesbury already talking
Lord
about like
Shaftesbury.
how.
Okay, so okay, 100% there were Christian Zionists. That's not the British state. I would agree with you.
Lord Shaftesbury wasn't a peasant. He was somebody who was connected to
So,
the
what
foreign
I'm trying
office.
to explain to you, there absolutely was Christian Zionism was effectively born in the UK. It was born out of a branch of Protestantism called millenarianism. Thomas
Yeah.
Brightman, I believe, was probably the first in the 16th century, and there was a belief that for their Messiah Jesus, to come back and rule for 1,000 years, the Jews needed to return to the Holy Land. And this is
Right.
why Christians petitioned Cromwell to readmit the Jews. It was born out of this worldview. But that's
Yeah.
very different from the geopolitics that shaped the...
But no, but when they were speaking of these things, there was the dimension which was religious and bringing the Messiah, but there was also the dimension which was imperial, which gets carried
No,
on.
you're
But
conflating
it
two
does get
completely
carried.
different concepts.
Well, no,
So,
but I'm saying like
so if you were to say David Lloyd George and Arthur Balfour, etc., had a double agenda. One, they were religious. They had a triple agenda. They saw the state of the Jewish people in the world, the persecution, and they felt great sympathy.
well,
They
not enough sympathy to want the Jews in the UK, right? Like not enough sympathy.
no,
to
they
say, "Come
admitted
Jews."
that they did admit Jews to the UK.
Okay,
My family
okay,
came to the UK as Jews,
okay.
escaping
Yes,
Russian persecution.
yes, but at some point they said we're going to close our doors and we're going to open
Yes,
Palestine.
because British.
So
No, it was
the
the opposite.
British are anti-Semites.
When they closed the doors of Britain, they closed the doors of British Mandatory Palestine. History is confused. They issued the 1939 White Paper at the height of the Holocaust. Well, not the height, at the beginning of the Holocaust. They
Because the Arab
blocked.
Revolt had just happened, right?
So,
Like it was the
so,
result of the Arab Revolt,
but
right?
what I'm trying to explain to you is they locked the doors of British Mandatory Palestine to Jews during the Holocaust. Basically, between 1917 and 1939, you had a shift in politics. You had a shift in government. They moved to a Labour government, and
Yeah.
Labour were pro-Arab. They were Arabist and they were anti-Zionist. And when you read any of the British officers, they write extensively about when they're in British Mandatory Palestine. They all sympathise with the Arab nobility, who they see similar to the British aristocracy, and they saw the Jews as a bunch of Eastern Europeans, disruptive
When are we saying?
socialists. So this is the period, British Mandate period, which is 1920, to 1947.
What about Churchill saying in 1920 that like moving a few million Jews to Palestine would be beneficial to the British Empire?
So
Like,
Churchill was 100% at this point, but also Churchill was also Arabist at this point. So 78% of Britain's awarded mandatory Palestine on the condition they establish a Jewish national home and honour the Balfour Declaration. This is what the League of Nations say 3 years after the Balfour Declaration is penned. The first thing Britain do is give 78% of the Jewish national home away to the Arabs, to a man called Abdullah.
But you can't. I mean, you're saying the Jewish national home as if there's already some claim there that.
Well, no, this was the basis of the League of Britain getting the mandate. I'm just talking international law. International law was Britain were awarded mandate to establish a Jewish national home. The first thing they do, they give it away to 78% of the land away to a foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
The foreigner is Emir Abdullah, who was born in Mecca, many kilometers away from Israel.
We're talking about the King of Jordan. Who are we talking about?
Yes,
here?
King of Jordan, King Abdullah.
Yeah,
it wasn't Jordan then. So when he
what
gets
the British did to the whole region is fucked, in my opinion, right? Like what they did to the whole power structure. Of the region,
I actually think the British were far more noble. I don't like what the British did, but far more noble than any other imperial force before them. Because why? Because they followed Woodrow Wilson and they looked to empower the indigenous communities into self-determination. So you see the birth of nation states at the hands of the British, rather than ruling as an imperial force like empires before them. So like when the Ottomans took the land, it was Turkish, it was Ottoman. What the British did, they divided it up and tried to establish nation states for the indigenous peoples that lived there. This is overlooked by most people on the left. So
sorry.
Iraq,
you're saying they were doing that in the Middle East while at the same time holding all these territories all over the world. So they were at least making an exception to their regular policy.
Ask yourself a question. How did the British Empire suddenly fragment into many nation states? It's because they adopted the right to self-determination for the indigenous peoples of these various lands. This was why. There's two key components that led to the breakup of the British Empire. Obviously, it was the financial burden. It was very expensive to maintain. But second, there was a belief that people should have the right to self-determination, be they Arab, Jew, Kurd, be they.
You don't honestly believe that, do you?
Of course I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying it.
Oh, okay. No, because my impression of the British Empire, even in its dismantling, even in its final days, was that it was decidedly against the self-determination of the people of the countries that it was exiting, right? It was never saying, all right, everybody, we're going to leave Iran.
Let's just deal with Jordan. Explain
Okay,
what you
yeah.
think happened in Jordan or
My
Palestine.
understanding is that for the British to beat the Ottoman, and again, like you might be a historian, I don't even know what your background.
The British have beat the Ottoman by this point.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And so they've been awarded the mandate as the victors of World War One, and they've
Yeah.
decided to reward some of their allies during their wartime struggle by giving them lands in their names, right? Like the Hashemites weren't plucked out of a hat; they were people that assisted
We're
the
kind of in agreement here. Okay, so there's
right?
no
Okay.
disagreement here.
Like the Hashemites have no real connection to Jordan, right? The Jordanian people are not themselves Hashemites. As you say, the Hashemites come
Yeah.
from Mecca. The Jordanians are ethnically Levantine mixed people, right? Like they are from that area, right? So the
It's a
idea
very
that,
small community, but yeah.
I mean,
I
these
mean,
populations
they're not
weren't.
just from that area. So you have Circassians, you have many different. So the Ottomans have a policy called Sırgun, which is they would move different communities into an area. So the Palestinian people are incredibly ethnically diverse because different different caliphates would move different people in. So the Ottomans move Bosnians in, they move Circassians in, they move Turkmen in, they move different communities into the land for a variety of reasons. The Circassians was in reaction to the Circassian genocide.
Okay, when
The
is
hand
this?
of the,
Just so I know, what are we talking about? When was
so
this
the
like
Circassian
engineering
genocide, I
done?
believe, was in the 1700s, crossing into the 8. It was over a period of time. And during from say the 1700s to the mid 1800s, maybe the Ottomans were moving Circassians into the land, so they'd have a population that was lower than. They also needed to find homes for all these. There wasn't a term refugee back then, but these refugees, the term refugee evolves much later, or the concept of a refugee. Um,
So in
and
Jordan, it's a mix of people, is what you're saying. Like,
Jordan was a mixed, but largely Bedouin and Arab is the majority population.
right.
Bedouin
So
Arab.
my sense is that the Hashemite rulers don't have much legitimacy over the people of Jordan, right? Like they didn't choose it. It wasn't self-determination. It was a royal family imposed on them as a reward, right? Didn't they give Syria to another Hashemite?
Here's the irony. Here's the yes. So this was the whole
They were
Abdullah.
like gifting. They were like gifting. They're like a
It's not
Syria
that.
for
So
Hashemite.
this is why I half agree with you. The Sharif and his sons, the Hashemites, sided with the British and fought with the British against the Ottomans in return for what they would believe would be an Arab empire in the region. That's kind of what they were promised. Everything west of Damascus. And the Palestinians, interestingly, fought with the Ottomans. So the Arabs, like under Hajj Min al-Husseini, they fought with the Ottomans. So what happened was the British promised this land to the Arabs in return for them fighting exactly as you say. There's no argument there. But the Arabs accept the kingship of Abdullah. Why? Because he's Muslim and they're Muslim. And there's no concept of a Jordanian at this point. These have been Muslims living under Ottomans, Muslims living under Mamluks, Muslims living under different Muslim caliphates. And this was just the next expected caliphate that would rule over them, and they would be good Muslim citizens. They'd pay their zakat, which is a tax for the Muslims pay, which was different to the jizya and the kharaj, which the Jews and the Christians pay. And so for them, this is normal. This is very normal.
But you call that self-determination.
No, so this is where I'm getting to, and so the British have no desire, for a variety of reasons, but after World War II, financial becomes a big part of it. No desire to maintain lands that are very expensive, but they also buy into the American concept of the nation state and the right to self-determination for indigenous people. So you have a dual agenda. You have one is... there's a third point as well.
I mean, America didn't believe in that either. Just so we know, like America didn't believe in the self-determination of peoples either, right? Because it didn't practice.
I mean,
that.
I'd say
right?
Woodrow Wilson really did. I mean, it was his doctrine that went around the world. But what was going to get to this, a third part, which is a vital part, which we're missing out of, which I've not mentioned yet.
I'm sorry I interrupt so much.
No, it's fine. I'm talking more than you, so you can interrupt. Is trade. So if Britain is the one who has a close relationship, or the French have a close relationship with these new nation states, there will be economic benefits to that. So the British is obvious. You've got this with this region. You've got the Iraq Railway going to ideally Haifa. You've got the Suez Canal to the south. There's big financial, economic
It's the
reasons.
Clapham Junction.
Exactly, the Clapham Junction. So I've not heard that before. That's I like that.
Oh, it's Wedgwood. I forget what his name is. Wedgwood. He said Palestine will be the Clapham Junction of imperial interests. Jews will be men on whom we can depend, if only because they depend on us. The Jews depend on us. That's in 1928.
I haven't heard that before, so it's good. I need to stop talking more and I'll learn. But so what happens is King Abdullah claims he's marching from the Hijaz with 8,000 soldiers on the way to Syria to liberate it from the French for his brother. This is what he claims. Alec Kirkbride comes out and meets him with his 8,000 men, and basically Alec Kirkbride is the diplomat that's the de facto ruler of one of I think it was divided into 6 different sections, Jordan, and he's in charge when he calls it the government of Moab, after the Moabites in the Bible, Moab. And he comes out, Kirkbride comes out, meets Abdullah, and basically hands him the keys to Jordan. Abdullah asks him about how's the government going, and he says, well, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's just a matter of the historical record or whatever it is, because now that you're here, Your Highness, it doesn't matter. You're here, it's your land. So then they have the Cairo Peace Conference where Churchill, Chamberlain, Lawrence of Arabia, Abdullah, and a few others turn up, and they formalize the partition, the two-state solution of Palestine, and give this foreigner 78% of the land, and there's no objection from the Arabs, and they don't call it Palestine. At that point, it was largely Jews and British calling the region Palestine. And for the British, Britain now have a super loyal, probably Abdullah was the most loyal, far more loyal than the Jews, far more loyal than any other Arab ruler, agent in the Middle East. It is British officers that lead his army, John Bagot Glubb, Pasha Glubb,
Until like the 60s or something, until the 50s.
Yeah, exactly. And and truthfully, they are the most effective fighting force in the 48 war, with the exception of Israel. Israel obviously outclasses them, maybe because they were more numerically strong.
Yeah.
But Abdullah's really the only person who captures territory from...
Which is why Israel makes a deal that says you can take the West Bank, right? Like, wasn't there some sort of understanding?
Yeah, exactly. There was the 49 armistice line. They both agreed to temporary peace lines, which formed the de facto border, which all the peace negotiations then work from, and are based on.
Can I ask like just 2 questions? I think one is, it seems that the Zionists had a head start when it comes to nationalism, right? That the concept of that kind of national identity hadn't really reached the Palestinians, especially, right? If they didn't see
100%,
right? So that might have given them an advantage when it comes to saying, well, we have a national identity and you guys don't, because you would have accepted a Hashemite ruler over yourselves, etc. Well, maybe if we had allowed national identity to trickle into Palestine a little bit more, maybe it would have materialized to the point where it is now, which is very, very strong and very, defined by its national borders that are pretty arbitrary when you come to think of the people that live there. So that's one sort of question is like, well, is it just that they're at a disadvantage because culture was spreading in a certain direction at a certain pace, and
completely.
simply the Jews were where nationalism was being really talked about in Europe, the European Jews, right? Because Zionism isn't a Mizrahi, at least political Zionism wasn't a Mizrahi movement. It was a movement in Europe because nationalism was really like what everybody was kind of talking. We are the Germany for the Germans, Italy for the Italians, and stuff like that. The second question is, if any of the nations that talked about self-determination really believed in it, do you think that they would have traded their imperial interests for the self-determination of the people? If they saw in any way that the self-determination of the people that they were supposedly handing over these sort of the reins of these regions to, if they ever saw, because it still exists today, if they ever felt like those people wouldn't be friendly to their interests, right? Would they accept their self-determination, or would they then quash their self-determination and say, yeah, your self-determination is not that important to us. In the end, really what we need is to have access to the Suez Canal and the railroad and stuff like that. That sort of supersedes it.
So the first question, I think that not only did the Zionists have a head start, then I think this is what you're saying, I think we're in agreement, that gave them a very distinct material advantage. So while the Arabs didn't really have an identity, didn't have anything that unified them, I'm talking about the people who lived in the land. They were a Gazan, an Arab from Gaza City, an Arab from Al Khalil, Hebron, an Arab from Jenin, and they were Muslim first, Arab, I don't know, Khalili second, and then a subject of whichever imperial force was controlling them third. While this
And
was
Christians too, of course.
while this was the mindset of the Arabs, the Jews were building up the infrastructure, the institutions of statehood. And so from electricity plants to draining swampland, turning the building of cities, the Jews were focused on nation building, and most of the Arabs that were living in the land were focused on just existing.
Well, I think the other aspect of nation building, which was absolutely crucial for Zionism, was diplomacy, right? And the Jews were very, very up to date in who to talk to, how to talk to them, how to pressure these countries, how to make a case in the way that there was nobody from Palestine that had the ear of anybody to really articulate that vision of a future nation which would be integrated into a European economy.
But I think that's because there wasn't and I think I'm agreeing with you. There wasn't the concept of a Palestinian Arab nation at that point. There was an expectation that there'd either be a pan-Arab state empire, there'd be one of the neighboring nations like Egypt or Jordan would come into Lebanon, Syria. They'd take the land, and so I was going to say the Arabs were very effective at lobbying. So I think it's incorrect of you history through the lens of Israel lobbyists versus Palestinian Arab lobbyists, because that concept didn't exist. It hadn't come into existence yet. And so the two forces that were fighting for international recognition at this point was basically the Arab nation saying, we don't want the Jews here, or we don't, at the very least, we don't want them to have any autonomy. But the language kind of was more genocidal than just
I mean, if they had just read anything the Zionists were putting out, I think they could have just said, we don't want this at all, and it would have been clear what they meant is we don't want the displacement of our people and the transformation.
Well, no, because I don't think there was at this point, if you read most of the early Zionists are talking about coexistence, there was a belief from most of the early Zionists that the Arabs were actually, say, Ben Gurion sincerely believed that the Arabs were of Jewish descent. I disagree with them. I think when you look at genetic studies, the history, they weren't of Jewish descent, but he believes they're of Jewish descent, and they will just embrace Judaism and their Jewish identity when the Zionist states, when they declare independence, they're saying things like, not a right that the Jew has will be denied to any other minority. Obviously talking about Arabs, will be denied to the Arabs.
But the Americans also, when they founded their country, said a lot of bullshit that then in private they totally betrayed.
No,
right?
Because what then happened then manifested.
Like, I know that Ben Gurion is kind of like an idealist kibbutznik, and he really thinks there's some kumbaya there. But certainly in private, he wasn't saying the same things at all. He was saying, hey, we'll accept this land for now, but don't worry, we'll have the whole thing eventually. No, he accepted a partition plan that already called for the expulsion of 225,000 Palestinians from the land. That's something that he accepted.
He never accepted. So first, transfers were proposed by foreign entities, not by Zionists. The Zionists were very... It's white. In 1948, 20% of Israel's population were Arab. Today, 25% of the population is large Arab. It's not Jewish. There's been a minority...
1948 is not the beginning of depopulation.
There was... So we can get onto the so-called Nakba in a minute. What I'm trying to say is the Jews were literally ethnically cleansed from every territory that the Arabs took control of. The Arabs weren't... The Arabs weren't... No, when was the first massacre of Jews?
I mean, listen, the Farhud is in 41, right?
No. I'm talking way before that. We're talking. I'm talking in what became British Mandatory Palestine.
Hebron massacre.
Even before Hebron massacre, you have the Nabi Musa massacre. Some would even start from Tel Hai, which
none of them comparable to Europe at all, right? None of them in scale comparable to pogroms in the Pale of Settlement and stuff like that, right? I mean, obviously, Jewish life is
absolutely comparable. You're talking, yeah. I mean, entire
community. We're talking about like dozens of dead and stuff like that, like 39 dead, 82 dead, stuff like that.
I mean, that was that was the case with most of the pogroms in Europe as well.
Was it?
Yeah. It wasn't until the Holocaust, which you just see insane numbers. Um, the Holocaust was, I mean, the pogroms were, don't get me wrong, were horrendous. But when you
Yeah.
look at the numbers of what's happening in British Mandatory Palestine, it's absolutely comparable.
Yeah, sorry. Just if you had a choice, you're Jewish and identify as Jewish and are proud Jewish, so it's like this is very different for you. Like, if you had a choice, you're a time traveling Jewish person, and you could choose to have your family live in any land, right? Either a Muslim land from 800 to 1940 to 1939, or a Christian land from 800 to 1939, but you couldn't pick where it was and you couldn't pick when it was. You couldn't pick the time and you couldn't pick the place. So it could be anywhere in a Christian land from that time or anywhere in a Muslim run land. Where would you feel the safest to have your family be?
What's the time period from, say, 637
From
to
the conquest of the Arabs, right? From the Arab
yeah,
conquest.
634,
until
637, yeah,
until 1939. Where did Jews live in safety without being expelled?
So what I would say is, so I think I'd go with the answer that you're trying to force me into.
You can say it. You can say it.
Yeah, no, I would say I would, with that choice, with no, you can't say which of the rulers, which of the lands. I would say Muslim. What I would say, though, the choice you've given me is
a shitty choice.
Would you rather a
Yeah,
husband?
no, I get it.
Like, you're a woman. Would you rather a husband that beats you or beats you and rapes you? I'm going to beep that word. I go with the beating, but still, it's not the husband I want. Yeah,
I could at least say it, and I would say, listen, none of them are preferable. I understand. I would never want I would never want Jews of the world to live in second-class citizenship anywhere. Like, to me,
can I just ask a question?
Making the comparison and asking them to choose which second-class citizenship is preferable is an insane question. I get it, but my sense is that, like, obviously there was violence directed toward Jews all over the world, pretty much everywhere that they settled, right? But it's like the Jews of the Middle East, right? Like, weren't the most highly persecuted, even up until the founding of Israel. The Jews had to be kicked out. They were hugely
persecuted,
but they had to be kicked out of these countries. They wanted to stay in these countries, right? Like, if they hadn't been kicked out of these countries, they would have chosen to stay in these countries, even though there was persecution, because this is where their homes were and this is where their families and cultures were, right? Like I guess I don't understand. Like, obviously the Muslims expelled Jews from all the land, but why did they wait until 1949 to start? Like, they had 2,000 years.
So I just want to read something to you, just because this often gets overlooked. So in 1847, so this is Ottoman period, there is a Jewish traveler, and let me just get you his name, just opening up the article. Israel Joseph Benjamin. And he visits Palestine. He visits what would become British Mandatory Palestine, Israel. And he says, the state of the Jews in the Holy Land. Deep misery and continual oppression are the right words to describe the condition of the children of Israel in the land of their fathers. One, they are entirely destitute of every legal protection and every means of safety. Instead of the security afforded the law, which is unknown in these countries, they are solely under the orders of sheikhs and pashas, men whose character and feelings inspire but little confidence from the beginning. It is only European consuls who frequently take care of the oppressed and give them some protection. And just to add into this, what's happening at this point is Christians in Europe are doing fundraising and sending it, often with Jewish shluchim, I don't know how to say that in English, messengers to take the money and give it to the impoverished Jewish communities because they're destitute, and they give them backbreaking tax, which we're just about to read. With unheard of rapacity, tax upon tax is levied on them. With the exception of Jerusalem, everywhere the taxes demanded are arbitrary. Whole communities have been impoverished by exorbitant claims of the sheikhs who, under the moat of trifling pretenses without any control, oppress the Jews with fresh burdens. It's impossible to enumerate all of these oppressions, and I'm just going to skip down to number 4 because that's where it gets juicy.
Last one. Yeah, go ahead.
Their lives are taken into as little consideration as their property. They are exposed to the caprice of anyone. For even the smallest pretext, even a harmless discussion, a word dropped in conversation is enough to cause bloody reprisals. Violence of every kind is a daily occurrence. When, for instance, and then he goes on to give examples of the violence.
It's like being black in the Jim Crow South. You wink at a woman and all of a sudden they lynch you, right? It's like any situation would be a cause for them to burn your
And
house down, kill your children. But let me just say two things. First, and for three things, if you don't mind. One, I appreciate you so much, man. There's a lot of people that talk Israel here, and they are so thoughtless and they are so aggressive and violent, and they show me October 7th footage and stuff that I feel like doesn't allow for what I think is so far a respectful exchange of ideas. I hope you
Absolutely.
agree, right?
No,
It's
and
like
you
so
have a lot of knowledge as well.
I really appreciate it. Like it's really like it's an issue that I'm a little bit passionate about because I have one Jewish grandparent that was, in a concentration camp and stuff like that. And my feeling is, the solution for Jewish safety is humanism, global universal values and stuff like that, and Zionism.
We can get to that, but just to add one thing that your grandfather, if he was a religious Jew, would have
He was not a
believed. It's a shame then his grandfather would have believed this. The
Maybe.
Jewish sages say, who is a truly wise person? Someone who can learn from everybody. And so to be truly wise, you have to stop, you have to listen to everyone because you will learn something from anyone. And so anyone who's just coming with the script and being aggressive and showing you the images that they're not listening. And so I stop and listen because you've got things to say that I haven't heard before. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate it. The second thing I want to say is like that quote, Joseph Benjamin, or I forgot his name, like he seems to have a lot of love for the Jews of the old Yishuv, right? Like he seems to really care about their well-being and stuff like that. But who didn't really care about their well-being is Herzl, right? Who said like these are backwards Jews that need to be sort of like erased. I forget what his language was, but like we need to get rid of these backward Jews. And I think that's an interesting thing because I do believe Zionism comes from a kind of European arrogance, colonial imperial arrogance that says that we in Europe know what's right, and these backwards people, barbarians all over the world, don't know what's right. Even the Jews don't know what's right.
I think that's a massive. Just I've got to interject there. Herzl, if you read his, which I'm sure you have read his work, his only motivation, like don't read him out of context. Don't read quotes on the internet. If you can, the diaries. Don't read the abridged diaries. Read his complete diaries, and you know the man. His only motivation is to end the persecution of the Jewish people. That's what's motivating every single. And the Jews who are being persecuted are religious Jews who are living a simple life in a shtetl, in Europe, in Russia, in the Arab world.
Yeah.
And
my personal history is in some ways Herzl's history because my grandfather was a very assimilated Frenchman who paid his taxes, served in World War I. His father served in the Franco-Prussian War. They were participating in the fantasy of universal rights for all people, right? And they were betrayed. They were completely betrayed. And I think Herzl felt the same thing, right? When the Dreyfus affair happened, for him, this is like, what a joke that we believe in these liberal values. This is crazy. Like, we need to protect ourselves. And I completely sympathize with Herzl because it's, Jews are an especially persecuted people, no doubt about it. And taking matters into your own hands seems like the only thing to do. You can't keep trusting these benevolent white people, as you say, right? The third thing I wanted to say is the great masses of emigration that brought Jews to New York, to Brazil, to Argentina, to Australia, to all over the world were not from the Middle East, right? They were not from the Middle East. The Middle East may have had these deplorable conditions, which I will not pretend it was hunky-dory for the Jews anywhere that they lived as second-class citizens. Never would I say it's hunky-dory for those people. They should just enjoy it, swallow it, etc. That's not my insinuation at all. But it is clear that the Jews that chose to leave the most were the European Jews. And the Jews that lived in these lands, maybe they didn't even know they had the option to leave. They did choose to stay there or stay there for thousands and thousands of years, for 2,000 years.
I don't think that's a fair.
Why wouldn't they go to the New World?
Because it was information that the information and transportation revolution, which opened the eyes of Europeans to the fact that they could move. There wasn't ships regularly going from Iraq to America, transporting thousands of Iraqis who were looking for a better life in America. These did exist in Europe. So I don't think it's a fair comparison. just because the Jews of Yemen, there were horrific massacres of the Jews
But
of Yemen.
the Christians of Lebanon went, they knew about it, and the Christians of Egypt went, they knew about it, right? It's like certainly there were people in the area that, you know, like the Lebanese Brazilians came in the late 19th century, early 20th century, right? Like the idea of immigration,
The
it wasn't like
Lebanese
the
Jews and Lebanese Egyptians also left at the same time. There were
well,
Jews
so
in the
that's
not the
that's
entire. I mean, there's still a Coptic community and there's still a Christian community in Lebanon. So Coptic
there
in Egypt and then a
there is,
Maronite.
but I guess my point is that like these people certainly knew that immigration was a possibility, and they had
You've also cherry picked two nations that are on the Mediterranean, which have what I'm trying to say is that how do you even get from Yemen? If you're like the Yemen's a great example because there were horrific massacres. Kids were being kidnapped by Muslims. Well, they had a thing of it. It's
well,
crazy.
listen, kids being
Child
kidnapped,
marriage in
Yemeni
Yemen.
kids being kidnapped is not the point you want to bring up. You know that, right? Like Yemeni children being kidnapped.
So I absolutely know, and there's a big
Right.
difference. I'm not going to defend what the socialist Zionists did to the Yemeni. I pray with the Yemeni community. I follow Yemeni rabbi.
Okay.
The Yemen, there was a thing with children were betrothed at a young age. The marriage didn't really take place till they were 18, but they were betrothed at a very young age in Yemen because if the Jewish children weren't, there was a law that a Muslim can kidnap a Jewish child and marry the girl, which is just insane. And so Jewish children were literally being kidnapped. But there's horrendous massacres that take place in Yemen. The Yemeni community is impoverished. They're not in contact with Europe. They're largely isolated. There is some trading which is going on in Aden, which is a port in the south. That's like the cosmopolitan aspect, which was under the British as well towards the end. But largely, they just don't have access to the same information. There aren't regular steamliners going across the ocean from Yemen to America to the New World.
The people in the shtetls in Ukraine did. Right.
But because you had information, you had mass newspapers, you had mass information, you had people from Poland as a great example. Many Poles that weren't Jewish went to the New World for a better life. The entire European continent was ablaze with this is the land of opportunity, the golden Medina, the great country where you can go and have you can live your best life. That conversation isn't taking place in the Muslim world.
Right, but then like doesn't that sort of tie back to the idea that like the things that shaped Zionism were the flavors and
I haven't argued with that. I agree with you. I believe Zionism was inspired by European nationalism. I believe it was inspired by Christian
and
Zionism.
Colonialism, right? And colonialism.
No, so for instance, if you read any of the articles of I've actually done this. I went and read the Articles of Association of the Jewish Colonization Association. And when you read what they're talking about Jewish refugees. They're not talking about colonialism. So if you actually go to the trouble of not just reading the name of an organization or read Herzl using the word colony, what they're talking about is establishing it's for want of a better word, an ethno-religious community within an area. So
with people moving in
So when you take the Ottomans, Herzl goes to the Sultan and he has to establish a colony in what would become Israel or British Mandatory Palestine. Just as the Sultan has established Circassian colonies, just like he's established. Now, these aren't colonies in a colonial sense where they're extracting material resources.
Settler colonial and colonial are two different things, right?
They're both colonial. Colonialism is having a metropole, say London, and where you are then sending out your people and establishing a colony which then extracts the resources and sends it back to the metropole. It's an imperial mechanism, it's a colonial mechanism to extract wealth. When the Ottomans moved the Circassians in, that's different. These are, in this case, they're actually refugees. And he's rehousing a population which is loyal to him into an area where they can live, they can do. And so it's not colonialism in the sense of, in terms of a Circassian population, in the sense of when Britain is establishing colonies in India or in America. And settler colonialism is just the next stage of that, where instead of these colonies being temporary, they
Mhm.
either intentionally or they evolve to remain in the land. So
But that's, I mean,
America
the
being,
India and America are two very different models of colonialism, right?
if you're trying to argue that Zionism is colonialism, who is Zionism a colony of? Who are the Jews a colony of? And when
Right.
in the history of colonialism is it a
Right.
people going back to their ancestral nation
It would have,
and
if it wasn't for the 39 white paper, I think we would all understand that it's a colony of Britain. It's just that the Zionists turned against the British when their aims weren't being adjusted. But all throughout, that's why the Clapham Junction quote is important.
so when you read Herzl, when you read
Churchill's
Herzl,
saying it would be in harmony with the truest interests of the
Habibi,
British
Habibi, slow
Empire.
down. I just want to keep up with you. So you're saying Herzl is arguing in
Yes.
the old
I think,
in any of his works. You think he's arguing that the Zionist
be
project
friendly to European,
is no is to
extension.
be a colony of Britain or a colony.
It's a little, I think it's a little bit vaguer, but that's why, like, if you
I mean,
go
he
back
literally he
if you go
lays.
back to Shaftesbury, right? If you go all the way back, you realize that the articulation of a friendly Jewish population in Palestine as a
But
spearhead, right, of imperial
Shaftesbury,
interests. It's like the French and the Maronites in Lebanon. It's exactly the same thing. It's like, if we have a friendly group there, right? And now Sykes-Picot says we've created Greater Lebanon, which is mostly Shia or whatever. I forget what the religious breakdown is there. But if we have our client friends there, listen, they'll be an independent country. It's not going to be a colony, but we know that when it counts on our interests, the Lebanese are going to have our back, right? And I think we can maybe find a third word, right? If colony isn't the suitable word, I think I like to think of it as colonial, because they were using the word at the peak of colonialism. So it seems odd to me that they would just not really understand the meaning of the word, because it seems like everybody else around them understood what it meant to have a colony of Europeans in a foreign land.
I would really encourage you to actually just go to the trouble. Go to the it's stored in Plymouth in the UK. You can access it online. It's the Articles of Association, which is basically you can read it in newspapers as well. If you go to the historical record, you can read what they mean when they say the Jewish Colonial Association, and they're literally talking about establishing a place where Jewish refugees can be free of persecution. Nothing about the imperial interests of nation states.
Yeah, well, you understand also that in the myth of American history, America was a refugee place for the poor pilgrims that, like, were being persecuted in England and stuff like that, right? The language can be both, that these people don't have a home, etc.,
Sorry,
and that when
no,
they arrive,
you're just so twisting history to win an argument here. The Jews the Jews were being persecuted. Like, literally, a few years later, you lead to the death of 6 million of us.
No,
Okay, you include you because you're Zera Yisrael, you're the seed of Israel. Your grandfather was Jewish. This is completely incomparable to, yes, there was religious persecution, discrimination, but not comparable to the existence of being a Jew. Zionism was born out of necessity. The condition of Jews under non-Jews, unfortunately, be they Christian or Muslim, was intolerable.
yes, but that's why we go back to where it's like
no, but can I just go? Let me just conclude. Let me just conclude what I was going to say. To then reframe that as these people were motivated by imperial colonial interests of European nations is BS. If you wanted to say that the Jewish Zionists would,
I take it back. It's not that they were motivated by a need to serve the metropole. Definitely not. No. Herzl wasn't like, let us be good colonial subjects. I don't mean that at all. I believe that Herzl wanted to liberate the Jews and stuff like that, and he wanted them to have a homeland because, up until that point, if you had asked any Jew in Europe where they wanted to go, 99% of them would have said, I want to go to America, right? I want to go to the New World. The idea of going home and returning to doing Aliyah and stuff like that wasn't really in the minds of the majority of Jews because they weren't really doing it, right? So I get that Herzl was saying, like, first and foremost, what we need to do is save the Jewish people from European anti-Semitism, and we need to do it by creating a land in the land of Israel, which is our ancestral land and stuff like that. Trust me, I don't think he's being duplicitous in saying that, but he actually means, like, let me be a good servant to the British crown. What I do mean is that the case that the Zionists were making, right, to the British certainly didn't exclude the potential that the British were going to have, as Churchill himself said, that a British imperial interest in having a friendly government in the area, not a bunch of insurrectionary Arabs who we despise, right, or who we don't trust, or who we think are barbarians, etc., but a people that we trust as being civilized. They're going to bring civilization to the area, and it's going to modernize it, and it's going to integrate it, as the Christians did to Lebanon, into a European-oriented system, in a way from an Islamic, because, it's like, I mean, anti-Jewish feeling is huge, but anti-Muslim feeling is also pretty huge.
I don't think anti-Muslim feeling is huge at that point. I think that evolves much later. Lawrence of Arabia, which is a little bit later than the period. Well, actually, no, it's not. It is the period. Was famous because he basically LARPed as a Muslim.
Was the first one to be like, "Hey, Arabs aren't monkeys." He was the first one.
And so
it was like, "Hey, these people are actually brave."
No, I think
the first British man ever.
And so. Let's say if we say that 1917 is and maybe you would disagree with this, but let's say the pinnacle of European Zionism, zeal behind, like I'm talking of non-Jews. So you've got David Lloyd George. David Lloyd George he's the Prime Minister of the UK. He goes on to explain what he supports in supporting the Zionist project, or not even at this point, it's a Jewish national home. And he talks about some of the things you touched on, it being good for everybody. I think Europeans viewed the world through European eyes. They saw, and they were right, by the way, I completely agree with them. They saw the quality of life, the technology revolution, the industrial revolution, all this incredible stuff that was coming out of Europe, which would advance humanity. And I do agree it advances your literacy rates, life span, everything improves under this system. But they view the world... I mean, yes, absolutely. No. We have the longest life expectancy, the lowest mortality rates, the highest literacy rates.
Who?
I'm talking post the Industrial Revolution, which is coming from Europe, and then spreads out through the world.
Yes.
This technology and information revolution advances humanity.
Killed more innocent people than any other system that was ever invented up until that point. Massacred people to the scale of.
I would argue communism, absolutely. No, socialism, absolutely.
My friend, listen. I will give you guys cure for disease. I'll give you treatment for tuberculosis. I'll give you clean, sewage and stuff like that. Although the Aztecs certainly had it before the Europeans did. But it's like this technology, which we are very grateful for, etc., is also the technology that enabled the single largest mass slaughter of people in the history of this planet.
Yeah, I there's no argument for
over and over and throughout the world, and it exported it throughout the world, right? And it continues to kill people to this day. Didn't the Lancet study say that American sanctions killed 38 million people over the course of 70, 60 years? It's like this system which we like to praise, which all the things it does well, we praise it for, but we also have to be fair. It is also one of the most brutal and inhuman systems ever invented.
It's not inhuman; it's human. That's the thing.
It's human. Are flawed.
No. I'm saying human nature is humans will human. And so if you give humans technology, humans will human with technology. And so if you give a human a crossbow, he'll shoot one man. If you give a human a nuclear weapon...
Nationalism.
So National Socialism, communism has killed far more than nationalism. I
mean, listen, nationalism has a head start. Right, it has a lot of the great wars.
So the biggest,
it has Napoleonic era, it's like let's.
Would you agree with me that communism has killed more than nationalism? I would say
communism has killed more of its own people than nationalism. Right, it's killed more of its own people, just like Maoism has killed more of its own people.
Yeah,
but certainly America has. It's like, what's that?
I was agreeing tens of millions, with Maoism.
Tens of millions of its own people, right? But it's like in terms of bellicosity.
Well, what made their own people was the communists took control and then instituted the Great Leap Forward.
Huge fucking civil war, right? It's like the communist takeover of the Soviet Union was a fucking bloody mess.
National socialism.
It's not socialism at all. Let's not do that.
I mean, no, if you look at the 25-point program, there's major socialist themes in that.
My guy, like, if you're going to be one of these people, I've respected you a lot, but if you're going to say that National Socialism is a leftist movement, I don't know if
it's a fusion of left and right. It's nationalist and racist, which is definitely on the right, but it's also for collectivism, redistribution of welfare.
Anti-labor unions? How could it be against the organization of the working class?
So take National Socialism, take communism, and
Can we
compare it.
can we just set this one aside, man?
Yeah,
I'm really gonna
okay.
respectfully.
Okay, let's not do the National Socialism thing. It's a tangent.
Like,
It's a
that's
tangent.
such a crazy conservative. Like, I hear some of the silliest people on the internet saying that stuff, and you've been nothing but reasonable so far, historically accurate, I trust, well cited. Like, the idea that Hitler in any way wasn't just using the word socialism, just like Americans were using the word freedom in the 18th century because it was catchy, right? Is like, it's obviously
what I'm arguing, and is a tangent. So we probably shouldn't go down this. No, I'm just with the fascism. So when you read what the National Socialists write, they write you have capitalism, you have communism, and then they're the bridge in between, and they take aspects from both. And I think that's a fair representation. So, for instance, there's redistribution.
I don't think that's a fair representation. Tell me why you think that's a fair representation.
Okay, let me just pull up the 25 points. Actually,
they can't be between capitalism and communism, considering that communism was their biggest enemy. Right. And what they didn't like about capitalism was just that it seemed to be internationalized and they didn't really seem to have the influence over it. Right. The whole sort of myth of Jewish capitalism. Right. Was that like it was no longer in the hands of the Germans. And what they wanted is capitalism in the hands of the Germans, which is why none of the corporations were ever broken up. None of their leadership was like assassinated and replaced. The leadership of businesses got behind Hitler because they saw him as their best ally against the left wing, against the trade unionists, against the socialists, against the communists. So much so that the Nazis became famous as street thugs who would go out and beat up socialists and communists. You know,
so
they
let
were
me
fighting for an identity thing. It's like it was a branding thing.
Let me read. This is literally from Nazi doctrine from the 25-point program. We demand that the state be charged first with providing the opportunity for livelihood and a way of life for the citizens. So this is placing the power in the state, which we would agree that's National Socialism. All citizens of the state shall be equal as regards to rights and obligations. That doesn't get into the racial laws because obviously they're not equal. It's right. When they say citizens here, they mean Aryans. Übermenschen.
So not very socialist there.
So yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. The first obligation of every citizen must be productivity, work, mentally or physically. The activity of an adult may not clash with the interests of the whole, but must proceed within the framework of the whole for the benefit, for the general good. We demand, therefore, abolition of unearned incomes, breaking of debt, interest, slavery. That's could sound leftist. You could frame that in a left-wing language. Abolition of unearned incomes and the breaking of debt, interest, slavery. Going after the big banks, the elites, the plutocrats. It goes on to say, we demand nationalization. We demand nationalization.
Don't do all of them. Don't do all of them.
Okay. Would you say how I could see that as in a different world being aligned with socialist values?
Not only you. You know who else could see it that way? The working class of Germany.
Yeah,
they would also see it that way. But you and I know they didn't believe any of that shit because they didn't rule like that. Like you and I know, it's just like the Americans saying there's going to be all men created equal. They were doing it because it's the flavor of the time, right? But it doesn't reflect their intentions. It's like Zionists saying in public like they're going to share the land equally. But that's not what they meant because in private they were saying they wouldn't.
So I disagree with that, but we can circle back to that in 2 minutes. We demand the nationalization of all businesses which have been up to the present formed into companies. We demand that profits from wholesale trade shall be shared out. We demand an expansion.
Did they nationalize the businesses?
They nationalized many businesses, but they also collaborated with the industrialists as well, just in the same way that communist China does. It's comparable. I think Nazi Germany, this is my layman's take, I think the state capitalism of Nazi Germany is comparable to the state communism or capitalism of communist China.
Why isn't it comparable to the state capitalism of the United States, where we also get to
because for the very thing, we demand nationalization of all businesses. Like,
but they don't. But they didn't.
But they do nationalize.
They demanded it. They had all the power.
They nationalized, and they also centrally plan, particularly during the war, what factories should be building. They take charge of entire factories. They out factory owners that don't conform to the Nazi instruction, and so we demand an expansion on a large scale of. We demand an expansion on a large scale of old age welfare. Like that's definitely we demand the creation of a
The
this.
welfare was invented in Germany, my friend. You know, like Kaiser Wilhelm invented the welfare state, right? He created pensions, he created all these things. Like you have to sell it to the
To,
people. You do understand, like the reason they had
but
to say these things is because if they actually said their real program, which is we're going to be race supremacists, we're going to suppress dissent completely, we're going to not give workers
I
any
think they
power
did.
because
They
they
did.
wouldn't win anything, man. They had to win at least a 36% or whatever
Okay,
it is that they
we
wanted to give.
demand a land reform suitable to our needs, provision of a law for the free expropriation of land for the purpose of public utility, abolition of taxes on land, and prevention of all speculation in land. So,
Listen, like by that logic, right? I could take anybody's public declaration, any fucking insane country that terrorizes its citizens, and I'm going to look at its public declaration that we protect the rights of the people, and be like, look, the Democratic People Republic of Korea, they said it. Aren't they democratic? They're saying it, right? It's like no.
but
They're saying it because they have to
would
say
you
it. They're
would
not
you
saying it because
cede
they really believe it.
would you cede any territory at all? Like I'm saying that the Nazis did nationalize industries. They did go into factories and tell factory owners what to do, and if they didn't, they were thrown. I mean, not a little, a lot. They had complete control of the economy, particularly during the war effort. But so did the British, and so you could.
Because yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, but listen, this is where I'll give it to you, because I think like if you take the 1930s as a historical moment, everything's fucking scrambled. Like everything gets fucking scrambled, right? Because all these countries are realizing that capitalism is a really unpopular system. There's been a Great Depression, right? And it's debilitated entire sectors of the economy. And this wasn't the first crash, right? Like people had lived through many crashes. And so when you think of like Franco, and you think of Mussolini, and you think of Hitler, and you think of Stalin, and you think of FDR, and you think of Getulio in Brazil and stuff like that, they're all coming up with a modern solution, right? They're coming up with ways that seem, in our view now, like they're all socialists, because they're all like very strong state power. They're all very strong state control and things like that. But at the time, if you were looking at that situation, you could tell who was left from right. It wasn't confusing who was left from right, right? Like it was clear that some of these people were using this language of national rejuvenation through the engagement of the people in the building of a new state. This is like happening all over the world, right? But you could tell the ones that actually cared about it and the ones that were saying it for fucking show. And history proves it right. It wasn't like they were pressured by historical forces into taking these things. They ran the programs exactly as they wanted. And in those things, it's like somebody was saying like Mussolini was a socialist. Yeah, Mussolini was a young socialist. And then he got kicked out of the Socialist Party and he formed the Fascist Party. And in the Fascist Party, he said, fuck the socialists, fuck Marx, fuck all these things, fuck the communists. You got to admit, like, he's probably not a socialist anymore at that point, right? And if Hitler had to come to power by articulating a language that could compete with the socialists, who were the strongest force in Germany, right? The Social Democrats, the socialists, and the communists, if they had come together, they would have run Germany forever. He had to come up with a pitch that would articulate things in a way that the language of the people of the world would understand. This is also the beginning even of the idea of a working class, right? The idea of working class consciousness was 20 years old at that point. It was like barely invented, right? So it's like they're playing off of some of the flavors and language of the time. And I think it'd be extraordinarily unfair to discount everything Hitler said and did and behaved, right? And say like, well, no, but he was a leftist because he wrote these things and he called himself a nationalist socialist.
So I think
yeah.
one of the biggest things that we suffer from in society when debating these kind of subjects is words are loaded with emotion and they mean different things. We have different definitions. So if you speak to a Jewish person about what a Nazi is, they have a very different conception to, let's say, what a member of Antifa today conceives as a Nazi. They're two different, completely, like today, if you talk about, probably I would imagine the first person that comes to mind when you say Nazi to a Jew is Adolf Hitler. And the first thing that comes to mind to American Antifa, I don't remember, but
Whatever.
Adherent, yeah. Adherent is Donald Trump. Just from association.
But you know why? You know why?
I understand, right? We don't have to get into the Trump thing. One, I'm not qualified to have that conversation. I don't know enough about Trump. I like his policies on Israel. I don't know enough about his domestic
I
policy.
think the reason is because if you push those people and you push them through philosophy, through arguing, etc., what they would admit is that European culture is superior to the other cultures. A new world will be built, but perhaps if it has to be on the ashes of the victims, right? Maybe if that's what it takes. Like if you push those people to the corner, they will actually be
So
fascist.
that kind of pulls us back to where we were, and it's maybe a good segue to what I'm more interested in.
And sorry if I'm taking too much.
No, not at all, not at all. One of my things is I've learned through experience to speak as little as possible about what I know little about, and as much as possible of what I'm more knowledgeable. I'm far more knowledgeable on Zionism, Israel, Palestine than left wing, right wing, socialism, fascism, communism. I have opinions, but they're opinions. They're not really grounded in decades of research. And
well, thanks for your humility.
And so what I was going to say is, when I use the term left, right, so I'm largely talking small government versus centrally planned versus small government.
Yeah.
And National Socialism is more to the social, is centrally planned, and Western nations are more to the smaller government today. Although not so much anymore. We're in some weird social democratic.
But that's paradigm. that framing of left right is historically inaccurate. Right? Left right comes from the French Revolution, and left is like for the people to have power, and right is that like is conservative. Is that like there are people in power who have a better sense of what power should be. So we should probably.
But then how that anyway? What I was going to say is, I think this is exactly what I'm describing. When people say we have different definitions, we see things for and we're arguing a different argument. So I'm arguing for something, and you're arguing against something else, and we're not having the same conversation.
But we should be able to. I do believe that there's an impossible alienation between people. Your blue is not my blue, and we'll never resolve it. But at the same time, I do believe dialogue can allow us to set some terms in common and then move forward using only those terms in common, right? It's not like it's a hopeless endeavor because you're coming in with some idea of left and right, and I'm coming with another idea of left and right. I think we could both agree, perhaps, that as I'm describing left and right, where left is people power and right is vesting power in an authority that supersedes the right of the people, that it'd be very hard to articulate that on that perspective, Hitler is a leftist. And I'd say it's very hard to articulate that the communist revolution resulted in a properly workers' movement because it didn't really empower the people. They were subject to enormous authoritarian authority. And so like to even say like that's a fulfillment of kind of like leftist politics is problematic as well. Although it's as left as we've gotten it, it still is problematic in that regard. You know, but the same could be said of the freedom that's articulated by the West. It's a freedom that is defined in ways that, at least up until relatively recently, we're not really as we would understand freedom, where everybody's entitled to everything and stuff like that. And yet we're able to tolerate it as still an expression of a liberal idea that people will eventually have all the rights and stuff like that, even if it's imperfect. I got confused there, so maybe I.
Okay, but what I was going to say is that let's bring it back, because I think what I would agree with you is when it comes to Zionism, I believe the Zionists were inspired by European nationalist movements from communism, socialism, fascism, liberalism. You see all of those strands expressed in early Zionist thought. And I would agree with you that the Arabs of the Levant weren't thinking in those terms. They were still thinking in the Islamic framework, in that you have the Sultan, the Khalifa. He has his caliphate. You pay taxes to your local tax collector. He gives his share to the Sultan, and they're not exposed to the same information as European Zionists. But despite all of those themes manifesting in early Zionist thought, the umbrella is self-determination and Jewish refuge, a place where Jews can escape persecution. And it's a combination of those, in the same way that feminism is an umbrella for so many different streams of completely contradictory ideologies, but they're ultimately concerned with women's liberation. And so I think what seemed unfair in your characterization of the Zionists was to frame it as colonialism, a colony of European powers. I would agree and say that early Zionist thinkers were definitely thinking, how do we get the Europeans on side? I mean, with this tiny minority subject to intolerable persecution, and we want any ally and any support we can get. So obviously they're going to be thinking into those terms. If the British
And the
want to establish
Europeans,
a
likewise,
yeah,
the Europeans were thinking, how can we have friendly people there? How can
so
we have a
that's where
client
I'm
state?
agreeing with you. And so if they're thinking the British want the first, and this is actually what David Lloyd George says when you read his diary. He says that he wants to establish a Jewish national home, and to begin with, that's not an independent state, but he anticipates as the demography of the land changes and the Jews achieve majority, which is what you were saying at the earlier part of the conversation, that a nation state will evolve out of that organically. It's not something that's forced on them, but we're not talking transfer, although it was the British that proposed transfer. At this point, it's not talking about transfer, it's just talking about immigration into land. You have to realize there was a tiny population, and I'm sure you do realize, you're very well read, there was a tiny population of Muslims, a tiny population of Christians, and an even tinier population of Jews living in the land at this point. The land could support far more people, as we can see today. There's 10 million people living here. Back then, there was 300,000. And so they envisage coexistence, and this is where we got to the European thing. I'm just catching up with my thoughts. They did, as you said, they envisaged, and I agree with them. You disagree, and that's fine. We don't have to agree. That the Jews would bring technology, information, which would uplift the conditions of everybody living in the land, including the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, anyone who's here.
Every colonial had that in mind. You know that, right? Like every colonial project envisioned itself lifting the standards of living of the people that were there.
And I think there's truth to that. And this is one of the things that backfired on the British, because when they established the schools, who goes to the schools? The Arabs. Do the Jews go? The Jews take no part in the schools. The Jews are building their own schools. And so the Arabs are participating in British colonialism when the British are here, and they're benefiting from British colonialism. The Jews are segregated. They're not speaking the same language. They're not involved. And ultimately,
why not?
Because the British are, to use your language.
Oh, you mean the Jewish immigrants?
The British are colonialists. The Jews are anarchists and socialists that are coming. The early state builders. They're coming in from Europe, and they see colonialism and imperialism as a negative.
The early state builders weren't just poor displaced people from like the hinterlands.
They were hugely ideological. Read Herzl. He's a socialist. He's a protester.
No. But that's not the people that get to go, right? That's the people that get to petition. That's the people that tell Rothschild buy some land.
No, the people that go. I mean, literally, I've got a book which I can't be bothered going here. Called the Mandate Days. And you can read, he collects, the author, I've forgotten his name, collects the letters that the officers are writing. And this is what they're describing. They're describing the Jews as a bunch of revolutionary. I mean, because the Jews were quite revolutionary. The revolutionary movements that took, your grandfather probably was one of those. Mine certainly was. My grandfather was a communist. My father was a communist.
Hated revolution.
Okay, so I come from a line of communism. I was raised on Marx and Engels, which is why I have the worldview that I have. I was very conflicted and confused. And so the Jews were communists. They were revolutionaries. In whichever nations they settled, there were aspects of them that were disruptive.
Can I ask? Yeah, you know this better than I do, because I guess like my understanding of the first waves of migration that make it to Israel is that they're not radical thinkers. Maybe there are some among them. Maybe there's the beginning of kibbutzim idea and socialism and stuff like that.
But are you talking like the old Yishuv?
No, not the old Yishuv. I mean the first movements of European.
No, they're very ideological. They're very ideological.
They're not just like poor farmers that get swept up in this thing. Like if you were to like ask to do a survey of them.
They're ideological because they choose to go to Palestine when Palestine is swampland, when it's So no, these are deeply ideological people. When you read their diaries, when you read the work, that they're very ideologically
But not
motivated.
religious ideological, political ideological.
Political, ideological, and yes, political being primarily Zionist, being the biggest motivator, and then on
Yeah.
the left, looking to us, most of them escaping a terrible lifestyle, and in the same way that the Bundists were swept up with socialism, so were the Zionists. They were swept up with socialism, and but by the time you get to the Mandate period, this is already the 1920s, 1930s. These are now very overwhelmingly politically on the left. I think up until the 1970s, Israel only had a left-wing government.
Yeah, big swing.
A big swing, and it's gone. Personally, I think thank God, because the quality of life in Israel is incredible, and I think that's a downstream.
It's problematic when your government has such clear roots to terrorist organizations, right? When you're trying to fight terrorism, having your party have its roots in a terrorist organization.
I completely disagree with your
Well,
framing.
the Likud historically, right?
No, I don't agree with your framing of the Erdogan as terrorists.
Well, no, but it's the framing that like the United Nations, the British, the French, that's what everybody called them, right? Even like Albert Einstein called them that, Hannah Arendt called them that, right?
Yeah, because you have a schism. I mean, you're of Jewish descent. You know the internal divisions we have within.
They killed innocents as well as British soldiers. They were violent. Paramilitaries would be the nicest way we could say it, right? Paramilitaries.
But as a consequence of those paramilitaries, I have a state today.
Yeah, no, I know, but that to you, that's a good thing. To me, that's a bad thing, because if the roots of your state are violent possession, then I think that we're all the Jews and Jews descendants in the world.
But any violence is in reaction to violence. So that the Jews were subjected to.
No, because as you said, the Jews were tired of going hand in hand to people and begging them.
But you can't. Don't put words in my mouth.
If they weren't going to beg from protection from their people, what were they going to do instead? They were going to fight for it, right?
No. This is not what I'm saying. You're now massively mischaracterizing.
Okay, then tell me.
The Jews. Let me just be explicit. Yeah. The Jews are in their tens of thousands. They're a tiny minority. Going up to hundreds of thousands, they're surrounded by tens of millions of Muslims, Arabs, who are incredibly hostile. To argue that this handful of Jews are going to initiate violence against a much larger majority is a gross distortion and perversion of what happened. The Jewish paramilitary groups you're describing were born in reaction to violence that was inflicted on the Jewish community. The defense force was established to defend the Jews from massacres.
Was founded in defense, right, in reaction to violence that was perpetrated in Lebanon, right? Like that cycle of violence just keeps going, right? But we have to be honest.
I think what you're doing. I think you're being really dishonest.
But like for example, like let's say.
So I want to be clear what you're saying. You're saying that you think a few thousand Jews living in mandatory Palestine initiated violence against a much larger majority when they had no arms, they had no protection. The Arabs were far more vast in numbers and weapons, and you're arguing that the Jews were attacking the Arabs.
Let's just slow down a little bit, because like I'm sure you know that like the great military leaders of Israel didn't learn their military strategies from books. They learned them from being trained by the British to help suppress the Arab revolt. So the idea that they were a ragtag group of sort of disorganized people.
This is just such gross distortion or half reading of history.
Who
trained Abdullah? Abdullah's police force with the police of Palestine.
Not disputing that. Who trained Moshe Dayan? Where did he get his military training?
So obviously you had the British Mule Corps, you had the corps.
Why would they train him?
The Jewish Brigade.
Why would they train the Jewish?
They were trained. Very, very simple answer. They were trained for World War I and World War II. That's
what did they mostly do? The Jewish Brigade. Who did they mostly fight with? Did they fight with Ottomans? Did they fight with Germans? Did they fight with Germans?
So again,
right? Italians, Japanese? No, they fought Arabs, right? They fought Arabs with British training and British weaponry.
And the Arabs that fought the Jews did exactly the same.
But I'll tell you,
did the Arabs do the same? How did they have a better position?
I'll tell you why.
Sorry,
because if any of them had read what the plan was, they should have resisted it with all their might. Do you understand? If
What
any of them
plan?
had read that there was going to be a state declared, these people had not had a state. They had just learned what a state was. They had just learned, hey, people out there have
But
states.
sorry, what was Hajamin saying? Why did the Arabs react to the Jews? What were they reacting to? They knew the Arabs
Displacement.
No,
Economic
we're talking in the
exclusion.
1920s. Who's being displaced in the 20s?
Listen, listen, like as legal as it was to buy the lands from Ottoman and kick the people out, it certainly sucks to not be able to work the land of your ancestors, right?
I'm
Like
sorry,
your grandmother is
you're
buried
making
on
up
that
history.
olive grove.
You're making up
Your grandmother's
history.
buried on that olive grove.
You're
And all of a sudden,
making
you're
up
never gonna be
history.
setting foot in that olive grove again.
You're
You
making.
gotta understand that people would be upset about that, right?
You're now making up history.
Well, tell me about it, because I guess tell me about it, because you're the expert on this. So tell me what's going on. My understanding
So in the
is that when land was bought by the second richest man in the world, right, to settle Jews in the Holy Land, right, the local workers in these places were often kicked out. Not always. Sometimes they were incorporated. Sometimes they helped work the land alongside Jews, but they were, in as many cases, kicked off of that land which didn't belong to them. They weren't owners of the land because they were peasantry, right? But they had lived and worked that land for potentially as many generations as any of them could remember. Their names are the names of the village that is there, right? That is the case, okay? Like when those people get displaced, they get upset, right? When they read that that's a plan, right? A plan to resettle the Jews of Europe in their land, I would imagine, my friend, that if the inverse was happening and the Saudis had come up with a plan where they're going to start buying all of Israeli land, which they can't, obviously, because the giant JNF won't sell to any Arabs, right? But if they had the plan and they had the money and they started doing it and they started kicking a bunch of Israelis out of their land, the Israelis would get pissed off about it.
The JNF owns
They'd get pissed off. They
so
wouldn't welcome them.
The JNF owns 13% of 13% of state land, so it's just a weird thing to have said. But ignoring that,
but it's still an apartheid system because they won't sell land to the people that are Arabs. Like you cannot sell them to Arabs.
They don't sell that 13% to Jews either.
I know it's mostly like managed farmland and stuff like that, and it's like I get
forests,
parks and stuff like forests, parkland is right.
And,
but what I'm saying is, my point is like there's very few educated Arabs in Palestine, right? Very few educated Arabs in Palestine. Just a few of them.
I recommend you look at where Jews purchased land was largely, and there were instances where it was at the Sorok estate which they purchased, which was I think in like the Galil, which was describing one of the where they purchased land of absentee landlords and in those instances, yes,
they were there. These people were there. Yeah.
No,
the landlords weren't there. They're in fucking like Constantinople, in Istanbul, but the people were there. They had been there. Slow
down. Yeah, so I would agree with you. I got more motive than you, so you don't have to apologize. I would agree, and I think we're going to have to wrap it up after this because it's going to be a long video for me to publish otherwise. The absentee landlords sell their land, and as happens when people purchase and sell land, the people who may be living in houses they don't own may be evicted. And I'd agree with you in most of the kibbutzim, the labor was Jewish labor, and it was an ideological thing that the Jews had been unable to...
It was called Jewish labor. The word was Jewish labor, and it was a practice of excluding Arabs.
But let's slow down. Why? What?
Because they wanted to build up economic Jewish power in the land,
you're framing it from a modern perspective. So
why would they exclude Arabs from their banking systems and their economic network? Like, why would they do that if they were there to coexist?
So I'm not aware of them being excluded from banking systems.
Okay, I'll look into it. Maybe
there could be a hole in my knowledge. I'm not aware of that. I would agree with you when it came to the kibbutzim. What this is a social enterprise for all the workers of the kibbutz. They all collectively own it, and they all collectively work equally. And it's because Jews had been deprived the ability to work and own land in Europe, and so there was an ideological motivation to connect the Jews to the land of Israel, to the land they're living in. This isn't from a religious perspective. This is just from a historical, from a human perspective, that the Jews needed to be doing their own labor. They couldn't be depending on others. We needed to build up this skill set. We needed to be dependent upon ourselves and not dependent on other people. It wasn't about excluding others. It was about uplifting yourself and acquiring in the pursuit to what they wanted to do, they wanted to create a new Jew that hadn't existed for 2,000 years, and they wanted to escape the shackles of the ghetto, the yoke of the
Right. Which is
oppressor.
why they were so against Yiddish and pro-Hebrew. Like, I get one of the
And
beautiful things I find about Israel is precisely that it's kind of like a modern thing. They were coming up with an idea of Jewish identity, which was like, hey, there's this other way that we look at ourselves, not as victim, diaspora, subject, but actually like returning to our dignified position as kings and stuff like that. Listen, I love certain like symbolic aspects of Zionism. I'm an artist. Like, these are things that I really, really value. Even the revival, I like Yiddish more than Hebrew, but I think the revival of Hebrew is an incredibly like brilliant thing, like a solution to a problem, right? Like, all of this is great.
can I
Like,
just ask a
I'm
question?
not,
Why do you prefer Yiddish? It's a very interesting.
because I find that for me, what's most like meaningful culturally about Jewish history is diasporaness. It sucks because I don't want to say it. Like, I don't want to say like, good, thank God for diaspora. That's
But
not what
you
I
just
mean.
said how when we're in the diaspora, everybody persecuted us, Christians
No,
and
no, but I'm
Jews,
saying like,
everybody.
but this, listen, in America, blacks were persecuted, and blacks created one of the most incredible cultures that now dominate the world, right? It's like shitty things happen to people sometimes, and it's precisely their cultural uniqueness and their brilliance and their ability to persist that creates something fantastic. I'm telling you, I'm not saying I like diaspora as an idea. Let's diaspora some people out there so they can generate local culture. But what I'm saying is that I find it amazing that Jews adapted in all these different ways, that the Jews of Europe ate knishes and gefilte fish and stuff like that, but the Jews of Yemen wore colorful garb, that they all had their own unique, beautiful culture, each adapted to their own. Like, it's almost like evolutionary biology or something. Like, it's like you take a bunch of butterflies, you scatter them in the world, and all of a sudden they have local adaptations, and now you're
And
you're amazed by the beautiful, scintillating variety in these people. So for me, Yiddish is like, yes, it's a language that is the product of being integrated into a society that is foreign to you because you're Jewish in a foreign land. But at the same time, it's like Rastafarianism, it's like jazz, it's like blues, it's like all these products of this. Blues is connected to Irish folk music. It's like, do you think the Africans wanted to fucking assimilate Irish folk music into their fucking traditional rhythms? Like, they didn't want to. But the fact that it happened, to say like, let's undo that. This is like a dirty form of our identity. Let's return to some pure ancestral form. I have to like remind myself that's such a strange idea. Whatever ancestral form you come up with now, it's like a make America great again. It's not the real thing. Like, you're obviously not going back to the real thing. Like, modern Hebrew, I'm sure is a very strange language in the way that it came together, because it was totally dependent on a bunch of European speakers forcing Hebrew into like these forms that didn't really belong to Hebrew at all as a Semitic language. I respect Hebrew too. I think it's fantastic. As I said, I think it's an amazing thing that who was it, Ben Yehuda, like, that he would go, somebody
can I
would go
just?
through the trouble.
But why is it? Why is it that that's negative? But when you force Hebrew with German, that's positive.
It's not negative or positive. I'm just saying I prefer Yiddish because to me
But
it
you
doesn't.
were very disparaging of modern Hebrew and very complimentary of.
Oh, oh, no, I'm sorry. I do think that they're equivalent in a way, in that they're both subject to their historical conditions in ways that aren't the purest expression of an unfettered Jewish identity. They're both sort of being filtered through two things: Yiddishism and Ladino, and I don't know what the Arabized. I'm sure the Arabic, the Jews in Arab lands and Muslim lands probably spoke,
Judeo-Arabic,
right.
Judeo-Arabic.
They just spoke Arabic, or it was like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
dialect.
Judeo-Arabic. But yeah, it
Is it
was
Arabic?
it was just Arabic. But yeah,
Um,
it was just
I
written with
lost
the
my.
Hebrew script.
But it's like, yeah, I don't mean to, if like Hebrew was a product, like Mormonism is a product of 19th century American thought, that they would think to baptize all the dead because it's like a loophole that needs to be solved in Christianity. Like, some of these things sometimes are like a funny expression. Zionism, as we are talking about, it emerged in a nationalistic, race supremacist, imperialist, colonial moment, and so it ended up taking the flavor of those things. Like communism emerged in China, and it took on the flavor of sort of like its peasant thing. Like, I'm not going to say there's a pure form out there, but I am going to say I like all these different sort of versions that it took. I think Yiddish is, there's a book now that came out in about the Bund, right, the Jewish Bund, right, like which was a very competitive movement in Europe certainly their plan was,
And they all died, didn't they?
yeah, exactly. Their plan was as doomed as the Zionists, but the Zionists all died
No,
too.
the dinosaurs. We all lived.
I mean, a lot of the
I mean,
people that survived the war were Bundists too.
The Zionists went to Israel and survived
No,
on
they
British mandatory Palestine.
after the
No, British
survivors.
mandate. So I'm talking the people that were
Oh,
competing. The
okay.
Bundists all died in Europe trying to establish their Bundist state. They died at the Zionists who claimed you're going to die if you stay in these lands
We're
left
right.
and went to
Yeah.
Israel, and they were right.
Yeah, they were right. But if they hadn't been Zionists and they said, let's go to America, instead of like the Bund slogan was like, Jews living in their land or whatever, something, I forget what it was called.
Yeah, I agree for now, but America's lurching to
But
the right
no, I
at the
know, but
moment.
that's the place where it's interesting again that somebody who lives in Israel feels so safe, because it's like, at least for the 80 years of Israel's existence, statistically, the place where Jews live in the most danger is Israel, at least in terms
It's a
of the
matter
number
of
of dead.
framing. It's also the place that saved the most Jews in that period, and you never know
Only
what.
because only
You,
but only because the rest of the world would refuse to do it and opened the door to Israel, right? Like they said, England, no Jews; America, no Jews. If either of those places had welcomed the Jews, there would be no
no, but I'm
Israel.
talking like literally beyond that. The Arab, the Jews from Soviet Russia, a huge amount of them were resettled in Israel. The Jews of
The,
Ethiopia, wherever
the Middle
Jews
East,
faced famine, persecution, it was the state of Israel, which is why now
but
half of the world's population of Jews live in Israel. Yeah, half the world's
but
population.
a little less. Am
Well,
I Jewish?
no, you're Zeri Israel. There's a difference.
But like,
There's a
could I
there's a there's
could I
a
claim
religious
citizenship?
obligation. There's a religious obligation to convert you. You're my brother, but you're halakhically you're not Jewish. No,
But if you count me,
I
then
don't
no.
count
Then
you. I don't count you.
oh, I see. Okay, okay. All right. So yeah, potential Jews don't count. It have to be
Yeah,
real Jews.
you have to have a Jewish mom to be Jewish. That's how
I recently
Jews have
talked.
we're
Yeah,
Jews have defined ourselves for thousands of years with the same criteria.
I was talking to somebody recently about like some of these haplotype things, and it got me thinking about something that I guess I hadn't thought about, which is like, obviously a bunch of racists here will say that Ashkenazis aren't real Jews, and then you can just say like, well, they did the genetic testing, right? And what they do when they do the genetic testing is they take an Ashkenazi Jew, they take a Sephardic Jew, they take a Mizrahi Jew, they take a Yemeni Jew, and stuff like that, and they run everything, and they realize, oh, here's a marker that they share that isn't shared with Germans, isn't shared with
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it proves a common ancestry,
So
right? Like,
we're brothers. I
no, no,
completely see you as family.
no. But
But yeah.
this is the interesting thing that I never realized about the test. Well, that's only saying that they share a common genetic identity, but it doesn't say anything about geography, right? It doesn't say
Absolutely.
where they're from. Do you know how they can tell that the Jews are from the Levant?
So there's multiple ways. Language there is. You can also
No.
genetically,
The DNA. I'm saying like,
if you look at the study from Sidon of the Canaanites, if you look at there's been very recently they had
but
a
what's the
study.
baseline that they're comparing it to? How do they
So
geographically?
no, so I'm saying that they geographically locate by taking the DNA from burial sites, and now there's only recently been one done to Jews, and it
Okay.
was near Abu
Yes.
Ghosh
Yes.
in.
But that before that, like before
So
they did
what
that.
before that they would have looked at other populations in the Middle East, so Arab,
Exactly.
and so
Exactly.
the is it the
Not Arab, Levantine, because Arab is a term that's about
I
culture,
agree.
but
I agree.
it's not about their blood.
Arab is a colonial identity. I'll agree with that. But under the J2 and J1, which is very common amongst Arabs, particularly Bedouin, also common amongst the Kohanim. I think it's P58 is the Kohanim one, and half of Jewish priests, the priestly line, have this marker. When they dug up the Judean graves, they believe it could be in Judea. It could have been from the Northern Kingdom, but just west of Jerusalem, they found that it was getting J1, J2, and I think my haplotype, which is E1, B1, B1. And so these three of the most common genetic markers that Jews have, but they're also
Yeah.
shared by other populations in this region. And
Yeah, I
what
guess I
what I
never.
was gonna say is that doesn't tell you culture. So you can have these two groups with the exact same markers, and they can be
Yeah.
fighting each other and belonging to a different people. So just because
Yeah.
you dig someone up with the J1 or J2 haplotype, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything. It doesn't
Totally.
mean culturally you're related. You're the same
Well,
people.
yeah, yeah. It's the same. It's like the old people not pots thing, right? You can dig an Assyrian pot, and you can dig an Akkadian pot, and you can dig a Israelite pot, and you can dig a Roman pot, and you can dig all the pots you want, right? But that's just the culture. The people often are the same. They took off their kippah, they put on a cross. They took off their cross, they prayed to Allah. They weren't all ethnically cleansed every time a new culture arrived. They're often the same people. So to me, it was interesting that the way that, at least in these genetic tests, right, the ones that I was reading, I think Hammer is the person who's the author
Yeah.
of this study, right? The way that they identified the geographic location was just by saying, well, let's compare it to local population. So it's like, oh yeah, the Jews are very similar. This marker is also common in the Lebanese populations, the Palestinian populations, but they're not common in the Arab populations, right? So for me, it's like, oh, anybody that says like Palestinians can go to some other Arab land or whatever is missing the point that these people are as descendants of the same people. Like they're the survivors.
Genetically, that I think it's not the case. So the populations here are very diverse. So Bedouin, for instance, they have a high prevalence of the J1, J2, but that doesn't mean, as I was saying, that they descend from the same people.
Why not?
And it doesn't mean they descend from Jews. So let's say you have the Jewish
not
period of
Jews,
history. Yeah, but
what
it
what
could
is
have
a
been
Jew anyway? What is a Jew? Like, is a Jew a genetic thing, or is a Jew a
Jew is
cultural,
a people,
right?
the people,
Yeah, but
the
the
children of Israel.
people, but that's like I'm sure you would recognize that a person that's been diluted 100 times over, but has maintained their tradition, maintained their culture, maintained their
They
name,
belong to the people.
their
Yeah,
faith,
that's what I'm
they
saying.
would
It's a
be
people.
100% Jew. Nobody would ask them any
Yes.
questions
Yeah.
about it. Right, right. So we're not talking about genes. What makes a Jew is certainly
So
not genetic.
that's the point I'm
Blood
trying to
code.
make. I think we're making
Yeah.
the same point. So what I'm saying is, just because a Bedouin has the J2 haplotype and a Cohen Jew has the J2 haplotype, and the Bedouin lives in the Negev, it doesn't mean that the Bedouin descends from the Jewish community that lived here. They could both have a common ancestor that predates the Jewish community. That's the point I was trying to make.
Oh yeah,
And
most likely that's the case. Yeah, most likely that's the case. But also, it's not like every Jew is exiled, right? Like plenty of Jews stayed put, plenty of Jews converted, plenty. I mean, all over the world. In Spain, there's
no evidence of the Jews in the Levant mass converting to any religion. We didn't mass convert to Christianity. It was the opposite. We rejected Christianity. What you saw was there was an adoption from pagan populations. So there were many populations that weren't Jewish that lived in this region, Idumeans, etc. And many of the pagan populations.
You're saying that the Jews didn't mass convert in Palestine, but they did in Spain?
Yes, yeah. There were different.
Okay, why do you think there were prouder Jews in the Levant than they were in Spain?
Because there were different pressures. It was forced conversion or expulsion in Spain. That wasn't in it. That's why the Jews didn't mass convert.
What are the Romans?
Just don't let me finish. That's why the Jews didn't mass convert in Poland, because there wasn't the same pressure from the state or the monarch.
But what was the pressure that the Romans put on them?
The Romans did it. The Romans allowed the Jews to practice their faith.
Didn't they exile them?
They exiled them from Jerusalem. We lost Jerusalem, and there were massive limitations put on the practicing of the faith. But it wasn't Christian at this point. At this point, they were pagan, and there wasn't pressure put on the. As far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, so I don't want to speak incorrectly. But I'm not aware of the same edict going out where if you want to remain in the Galilee, you have to become a pagan. I'm not aware of any such decree. They did make it very difficult to practice the religion.
What? So what if you just didn't practice your religion? What if you just were like, well, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to temple and I'm not, not doing.
But that's not what I'm saying. The historical record doesn't show that. What happens is we have incredible academies of evolving in the northern part of Israel, and there they pen things like the Jerusalem Talmud. And at the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he conquers the land in 637, so this is the Muslim conquest, so 600 years after the expulsion from Jerusalem, there's 200,000 to 400,000 Jews living in the north of Israel. So still, even though the majority of Jews are now in Babel, in Iraq, in that sort of area, and now moving across the world, there's still a very sizable community in Israel. But there's no record of this community mass conversion. What we tend to see is a migration into other communities where there's less persecution, there's better living conditions. We do see mass conversion. Not mass conversion. We do see a conversion from paganism to Christianity, and from Christianity into Islam. But from the Jewish side, the Jews, I mean, is one of the things we did very well was we remained true to our religion, which is why we've outlived the Romans, we've outlived all these great empires,
Mhm.
and still practice the same traditions that they would have practiced 2,000 years ago, albeit with a little innovation here and there.
If if I can ask one last question, especially if you feel like we're closing up here,
Yeah.
like, do you believe Jews should not live in diaspora? Like, the Jews of the world should go home to Israel?
It's not a case of believe. I think it's fate.
Oh,
Zionism is the
religious. That's a religious thing, not like
no,
a practice.
no, not even like if I was godless, I think I'd arrive at the same conclusion, in that anti-Semitism is a reality. It exists as long as the Jewish people have existed. If you read Tacitus, he's describing the same anti-Semitic tropes that Nick Fuentes is talking about, whether it's degeneracy, whether it's separating. Tacitus is saying it all
Yeah,
2,000 years
corrupting
ago.
society, like,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so, in every society we've lived, at some point, the almost identical tropes rise up again and again and again. And what's happened historically is how we kind of started the conversation. The Jews look for a sympathetic nation to take them in, and hopefully we find one. Otherwise, we're put to the sword, we're put to the stake. And that's history. And so the Jews have had it since the Holocaust, okay, in the West. We're now seeing that change. I've fled the UK. I've had knives pulled on me. I've had the most horrendous threats my wife has received, like just things I would not repeat, people ringing her up. I've been jumped by Muslim. In Europe, it's largely Muslim anti-Semitism, Muslim gangs. What we're seeing in America is very scary. So in the UK, I was terrified of left-wing anti-Semitism, Corbynism, and just own that. Would literally, every time I speak to someone on the left, they start talking about the Talmud. It's like, whoa, like when did we jump from Zionism to the Talmud?
Yeah.
And in America, it's coming from a different place. It's the right which is lurching, and they are moving. Whether it's your Candace Owens, whether it's just
They're
people
Fitness.
with huge
Yeah.
platforms, and
So
pushing.
irresponsible.
And so as anti-Semitism spirals out of control, the Jews start looking for somewhere to go. And they're not going to go to England. They're not going to go to France. They're not going to go to Germany. They're not going to go to Saudi. Not that they'd be loud. There's an
Go to
idiot against
Brazil,
that.
man. Beautiful
I
Brazil.
mean, Brazil's beautiful. The people are beautiful. The culture's beautiful. But
Yeah, I
and
understand, like the idea that Jews should always remain at the mercy of the kindness of their host countries. It does sound completely absurd considering their history. Their history
yeah,
seems to indicate that, like, especially Jews, maybe as an exceptional case, should be afforded the leeway to have a state that protects them and stuff like that. I totally get that, but I do believe that nobody really is ultimately safe, right? Like, I'm a person that in some contexts I'm white, in other contexts very much not white, right? It's like, and I live always by the grace of what I believe are the social contracts that I've set up. Now, could I tell somebody who's been traumatized, right? Like, trust it's going to work out. Like, it'd be very hard. But at the same time, I shouldn't necessarily tell them believe it's never going to work out, right? It's like if I tell somebody who's been violently abused and they go to a new foster home and they're convinced that these parents are going to abuse them because all my parents have abused me so far, I think the right thing to do is to say believe that there's a possibility that they won't. But I could be wrong. As the agency putting this person in this foster care, I can't actually guarantee the kid's safety. I have to some degree, as we all do, put our hands put our lives in the hands of other people, like at all times. Like, we all are kind of doing it implicitly. There could be a genocide of any kind at any moment, where maybe tomorrow it's the Chinese that decide to genocide us all, right? So what we have to do, and what I think Jews did a wonderful job because they were diaspora people, again, another point for what diaspora generated that was beautiful, was precisely this idea of humanism, right? Like, of which Jews by necessity were advocating for throughout their years in Europe, that they should be treated potentially as citizens like any other. And everybody, like in America, like half of the civil rights people that went to the South to register Black people to vote, half of them were Jewish, right? To me, that's exemplary Jewish behavior, because it identifies that Jewish history in persecution is one that is not uniquely, I mean, exceptionally Jewish, but is also shared with all persecuted people, and sees the uplift of Jewish people alongside the uplift of all persecuted people, because that is the only way that without violence, without perpetual war, we can actually guarantee the well-being of all people. A little kumbaya, I'm going to give you that. It's a little bit idealistic, but we have been living in a world of idealism for a very long time, where we learned all these humanist things in our schoolwork and stuff like that about what these values are that guide our entire society, about individual rights and the freedom of people to express themselves all they want.
And what happens if someone disagrees with your humanism?
I think that's where, like,
I know, but by disagrees, I mean
as a leftist, right? As a person who's a communist, I think that's where the numbers come into play. Is that the majority of people see more value in protecting each other than they do in protecting the rights of certain individuals to make decisions for all of us. And so long as we aim towards greater and greater democracy, right, which means, like, I can't defend Russia, I can't defend Iran, I can't defend any country that denies the rights of their people to make clear decisions. I can't defend America either, where our political parties are totally run by corporations. But as a ship, as a civilizational ship, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, that's the boat we should be on, right? Which is that, like, we must work as a globe to defend all people to live in safety wherever they are. If they're Jews in Uzbekistan, they get to be Jews in Uzbekistan. If they're Mongolese in Cambodia, they get to be Mongolese in Cambodia. There's no such thing where we say, you know what, rewind the clock. Everybody has to go to their homeland because we're never going to be nice to each other. That's, like, so anti-modern in my mind. And I think as a modern society, to say, like, you know what, humans are going to be humans. We're all going to be greedy and we're all going to be war-driven is an insane abdication of our civilizational responsibility to make sure that the children of the future don't ever face the discrimination and the horrors of the past. And I think we've been doing a pretty good job to some degree, even considering it's under the aegis of a hegemon that I think is not a responsible hegemon, because it shows itself to be willing to massacre and mutilate people all over the world to advance its goals. But at least people are. Right now, we're having a democratic pushback, but for the longest time, people were getting more and more rights, more and more democratization. And my fear that Israel is that it sort of undercuts the humanist argument. Okay, it says, yes, humanism, but you don't understand. Some people need special case.
I'm just trying. Can I just understand what?
Yeah, sorry.
It's going to extend the conversation. So I apologize. You talked about. It only works if you get the majority to think the way that you think. Yeah, so more and more people come on board with humanism. Yeah, they buy into the idea.
I think my experience of this world so far as a 48-year-old person is that push comes to shove, I actually meet very few people that are fascists in their heart. I meet mostly people that want to share, want to collaborate, want to give, want to uplift, want to see people that are poor being fed, right? It's like, I do believe the majority of the people on this planet are really good people that would not see things through clan. They would see things as humans. They would see a person suffering and they wouldn't ask, like people do here, what are you? Like, they're always trying to figure out, what are you? But in life, I think people are actually just like, I'm going to help you first, and then I'm going to ask you if you're a Muslim second.
So it requires, you think most people innately are good? There'll be exceptions, I'm sure, but as a general rule, people are good. And for this system to work, it's democratic, so it requires the majority to gradually adhere to this set of values, this worldview. Is that a fair framing of what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe not fair, because I think you're putting into practice a system that I actually don't know what the steps are. I know what my civilizational aspirations are. Right, but like, I don't know.
Okay, so let me jump in again. Then it requires the majority. For it to work, it requires the majority. It can't be forced on by a minority.
That's right. Yeah. I have to think it through. I haven't thought of it in these terms, but I do think it should be yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to just working through. So I like to do a little hypothetical so I can understand what someone's saying.
I appreciate it. Thank you for.
And so, let's say you're building this communist. State world, and you have somebody who thinks differently. He's a capitalist. He's a nationalist.
Up against the wall,
he's a Zionist. Yeah. So what? The only way you need some form of force to maintain the order of this society.
There's no utopia. There's no utopia, right? Like, we're all going to be always stuck in situations where there's going to be uneven distributions of resources. There's going to be situations where we have to make agreements.
Guess what I'm saying? There's going to be a military.
I don't want the suppression. I don't want the suppression of those people, right? I think
the reason I'm saying this is, I think what you're proposing We got halfway there with the Soviets. And the Jews did not fare well under the Soviets. We were called the cosmopolitan bourgeoisie. We were put in gulags. We weren't allowed to practice our religion. The Zionists were also in prison. And so I'm saying just because you build... The Jewish people can still be vulnerable under such a
But
system.
take the word communism out of it. What would you just call it the final state of liberal humanism? Like you and I probably went to the same kinds of schools, and we were schooled in the same ideas about the equality of the people. I hope. Maybe you weren't,
Yeah.
but I hope. I really don't believe in the chosen people bullshit that somehow Jews believe they're better. I do believe
I mean,
most Jews
Jews don't believe that. No Jew believes that. Jews
no
believe,
Jews believe that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
religiously.
like,
Chosen means you were chosen to spread monotheism.
yeah, you guys have a deal with God. You know, you have a special
Yeah.
relationship. You know, it's like he's your man, he's his people. It just doesn't mean anything about like better or worse and stuff like that. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is that like I'm sure you and I are educated in the same ideas, and we aspire to the same. When you read the American founding documents, I'm sure you're like, yes, like people with rights to protest and self-assemble and have religious freedom and all these things. Like we agree that these values of the Enlightenment have the great emancipatory potential for all people. Let's set aside that it's Eurocentric. Let's set aside that it's based on the idea of a subject which doesn't necessarily exist elsewhere. Like I kind of believe still in these values as a great civilizational hope. If we remove the word communism and we just say, what is the fulfillment of that? Where more people have more rights, just whatever those rights that are enshrined, self-evident rights, inalienable rights. If we look towards the fulfillment of all those rights for as many people as possible, and we don't set the horizon as right now, well, that's as good as we did. We keep extending that horizon forward and forward and forward without an endpoint. There's no utopia. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be people that are suffering, not Jews that are getting genocided. That's not what I'm saying. Like, just accept it, cookie crumbles. Not that at all. But there's going to be people that are going to be dissatisfied with the system, and they're going to be able to, within the system, work within the system, articulate their positions, perhaps develop some sort of political power. But the system would always be built to ensure that it would never oppress a person for their opinions. It would never oppress them for their religious beliefs, right? Like, we don't know how to see it now because we still live in a world that, even though it says these things, won't even guarantee freedom for people in their own fucking country, even the most advanced democracies.
This is where we diverge, I think you are an idealist, and I think I am a realist. And while what you're describing may work, and it may be incredible, and all these different people that are protected, and all who have their rights enshrined in the law, they don't turn on each other. They all just get along, as you said before. They sing "Kumbaya" and everything's beautiful. I look at the history of my people under collectivist nations that were striving for utopia, under capitalist nations, under feudalist nations, under religious theocratic nations or empires, and it's been one of torment, persecution, and torture. And so I'm saying, okay, let you guys, let the humanists, you can try and build utopia, and if you achieve it over here, Mazal Tov. If you don't achieve it, we'll have Israel over here, and you're Zera Yisrael, so you have a place of refuge.
Would you have accepted a Zionism that had zero idealism, though? If it had just been the realist one, we got to go, we got to fight. We got to fight for our lives. It might mean killing Arabs. It might be killing all of them, but we have to do it. It would be an unacceptable proposition. What makes Zionism possible is precisely because it was an idealist proposition, that the Jews could become, as you say, new people with new values, right? It was a deeply idealist.
One of the things Herzl waxes lyrical about is the folly of chasing utopia. So when you read his work, he's against utopianism. He's he has lots of crazy socialist ideas, but he's very much against striving for utopia. And so it depends what you mean by idealist.
Or utopia, but that doesn't mean there's no idealism there. As you say, he's a socialist. He had a vision of a new society being built on new values, rediscovered Jewish identity of the modern Jew. I'm saying, like, if it had.
And by the way, he's not a socialist, and as socialism evolved, but he's clearly influenced by lots of socialist ideas.
If it had just been realism, like, I don't think the Jews could have gotten behind it. If he just said, like,
but the idealism of Zionism is grounded literally in the soil. The idealism is, this is where we had our ethnogenesis. This is the land where we belong. We belong
Is it?
nowhere else. So that's the idealism. Oh, absolutely. I mean, from a history. I mean, I don't know if you've
The
done
whole
many
Persian
religious.
thing, that whole myth, is that a myth? The whole Persian thing that like Jewish identity was created during exile, like that, like Talmud, Torah worship, and the systematization of Jewish identity wasn't created in Israel. It was
No,
created
so
by.
how it was no. So you have
Yeah, I don't know these
the
things, so I'm
so you
asking.
have
Like,
the Torah, which is like almost the constitutional document of the Jewish people, and that's the foundation. And whether you believe it goes back to Moses and comes from God, it does. That's the most ancient of the documents we have.
mhm.
And then you have like the prophets and the writings. So you have like the period of the elders, the judges, the prophets, the judges. You have periods of Jewish history, but the Mishnah, which the Talmud is based on. I mean, I assume we're talking about the Talmud and Talmudic law.
Yeah, I don't actually know well enough. I'm kind of talking out of my ass.
Okay. So I won't even go into that detail. Basically, Jewish history and the Jewish religion is shaped over many millennia. Um, and the modern religion that we practice today is largely derived from the laws of the Talmud, which are a protection of the Torah. So the Torah is the constitution. You can't eat bacon. You can't cook a baby goat in its mother's milk. And then it's the Talmud that expounds and presents most of daily practices, what you say, what prayers you say, how you say them, when you read the Torah. A lot of this comes later. Some of it comes in exile, some of it comes from Israel. It's a combination of the two. But it all comes back to the land. So, for instance, whenever we eat food, we're praying about the land. When we pray 3 times a day, we're praying about rebuilding and returning to Jerusalem.
Yes, but
Our
if
name,
without those things, is there still Jewishness? Like, is that still?
no, there is no Judaism without the land of Israel.
No, I mean, like those rituals that, like
So the rituals I described, is Chazal, the sages, had incredible wisdom, and we were a nation with a temple, and religious life revolved around the temple. So what did the sages do? When the temple was destroyed, they restructured Judaism in a way that the temple practice could be put into a suitcase and carried around the world and
Beautiful.
preserved in exile. And
Yeah.
so you have to pray in a community. So you have to live with a Jewish community. You have to have access to kosher food. You have to have access to synagogues where you have to pray with 10 men. You have to have access to purity, baths for purity. You have to have, so you're forced to live in a community. Then the actual order of the service is put into the daily prayer. When a Jew prays Shacharit, the morning service, he's just verbalizing the service that they had at the temple at the exact same time. So even though we don't have a temple, every single religious Jew knows the order of the services, which sacrifices were brought when, because he's verbalizing them. And so with incredible foresight, Chazal prepared the Jewish people for a life in exile, but the ultimate imbued in this repackaged Jewish practice was the return. And that's in the religion, it's in the text, and it's in the in every aspect of when a Jewish man gets married and a woman gets married, they break a glass to remember the destruction of the temple. When they pray to return and rebuild Jerusalem. Our name, the children of Israel, it's come from Israel the prophet, but this is the land of Israel. And when we have a state, the very rabbis that were authorized to create all of these rituals, practices, ceremonies, they're doing it from the courtyard of the temple. The Sanhedrin, the Beit Din Hagadol, the Supreme Court, sat at the gate of the temple. So it's all tied to the land. And
But at what
laws you
cost?
could,
But at what cost? Like, is it worth any price? Like, if, let's say, I'm not saying genocide, but if genocide was required, would it be worth it?
No, genocide of any people is never worth it. You can't
What if
genocide
it's
one
the mass
people.
displacement of people? What if it's the ethnic cleansing of people?
So
If you have to ethnically cleanse the people to accomplish it, is it worthwhile? Like, it's the fulfillment. It's the fulfillment
I
of.
mean, that's why we didn't. So no.
Well, I mean,
I
maybe
mean,
you could say the Arabs did it for
they,
themselves, but
they did it. We didn't. That's why there's no Jews in
but okay, what
the
about East
Palestinian
Jerusalem?
Authority.
Who's are the people in East Jerusalem leaving because the Arabs are telling them to?
So the people in East Jerusalem have been offered citizenship and rejected citizenship. I don't know who you're talking about who's leaving, so I can't comment on
Well,
that.
I mean, they're evicting people out of their homes in East
No,
Jerusalem.
so okay, this is such a distortion of the reality.
Yeah,
What
tell me.
happens is a Jewish person will purchase property from, and what they've started doing now. They can't go into too much detail, but
Nice shirt, by the way.
But yeah, what happens is Jews will purchase a property from the owner of the property, and it's usually in a property you'll have multiple people live in, and there will be people that object to the sale. They may even dispute internally. The person who sold it may even deny that he sold the property, but this all then goes to court. And
Okay.
proof is provided. Proof is provided. If proof is provided that there's been a purchase, so bank transfer, here's the money going into an account, however it's proven, then then at that point the state will intervene and carry out an eviction, as they would in any property, whether it's Jewish owned, Arab owned. If a tenant is being evicted because they don't have a right to the property,
Okay, imagine I'm a landlord.
and if I chose to evict my tenants, right, I've got every right to do that because
Every right to do that, and then people would be like, "What an asshole!"
Yeah.
Every right, right? Every right to do
Well,
that.
actually, not even. I mean, why should somebody call me?
What a greedy Jew! Like, like they'll say something like that, right? Like, they won't be like, "Good on you, mate. Good on you." They'll realize that it's not a nice thing to do.
But
And what I'm asking is, like, is it worth doing a lot of not nice things? Like, okay,
so I think we have a philosophical.
What if it's
we have a
the
different
restoration of the temple? What if it's the demolition of the temple mound and the rebuilding of the temple? And it's going to be the fulfillment, the true ultimate fulfillment of the Jewish aim. Is it worth destroying a sacred place?
I don't think we should destroy. I don't think we should destroy Masjid al-Aqsa.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm not even assuming that you are. I guess I'm just trying to figure out. Like, obviously, I respect. As I say,
I think you have a bogeyman image in your mind of what a Zionist or an Israeli, and I'm not that person.
It's only you mingle. It's because of you mingle, dude. It's just this place has taught me a different lens on it, which is that I thought I would meet a lot of Zionists who would be like old timey labor people. Like they would be very upset.
You're not going to meet them anywhere. You're not going to meet.
They're just gone. They're gone.
Israel post Oslo is that the left does not exist here. There is no left here.
Do you think that's a bad thing?
No, I don't actually.
Do you think Rabin was making a mistake?
Oh, Rabin was like to the right. Everyone thinks he was like a lefty. He was not a lefty. He was very.
No, I know
much
he's a war criminal. Like, he's somebody with a lot of blood on his hands. But I'm saying, like, he was a laborer.
I mean, I disagree with that, but no, I'm just saying he's so the I think Rabin was. I think anyone that ceded territory has ultimately made a mistake. I think Palestinian nationalism and Zionism cannot coexist.
Yikes!
And I'll give you an example.
Could it have ever coexisted?
Because of Islam, I don't think so. No.
I mean, but Islam as a driving force of Palestinian national identity for the most of its history was secondary. Right,
I completely disagree.
Oh, really?
Framing. Yeah.
No, because I mean, like, a lot of the educated elites of Palestine that were the most clear articulators of nationalism, for the most part, were not Muslims; they were secularists.
The Hajiman al-Hussein is probably seen as the.
He was only the Grand Mufti because the British made him the Grand Mufti.
Exactly, but he was the Grand Mufti.
So
and
he wasn't exactly like. Yeah, I'm not gonna like pretend like that guy didn't have the most important view.
I mean,
he's not. Listen, he's not the only person that was articulating.
The people you're describing as secularists. So take even King Abdullah, who drank alcohol for medicinal purposes, which is haram, it's against Islam. When he mobilizes the street to go to war with Israel, when he mobilizes the population, he declares jihad on the Jews.
Sorry, I forgot who you were talking about.
Abdullah, King Abdullah of Jordan, who's seen very much as one of the secularists, educated. He drank alcohol for medical reasons, according to his doctor gave him permission.
Married an American, right? Like
and so the point I'm trying to say here is, if you look at any Palestinian organization, you speak to any Palestinian, you look at any, whether it's a diaspora organization or it's an organization here, and look at their depiction of Palestine, you will never see Gaza in the West Bank. Never, ever. Not one Palestinian will ever depict Palestine as Gaza in the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, as we call it. They will depict it as
whole thing.
Western British Mandatory Palestine.
Yeah, the whole shebang, like Likud.
Yeah.
Like they define it the same way that Likud defines it. From the river to the sea.
But the
river
difference,
to the sea,
the
right?
difference is Netanyahu has on multiple occasions recognized the two-state solution.
In public, but not in private. In private, he said very different things, right? And so
I think you have to go off someone's public record.
No, dude, you can't go off somebody's public, because by the public record, Hitler's a socialist. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if you go by the public record, the founders of the United States were humanists who cared about the equal rights of all people, right? Like by the public record, yeah, you can't go by the public record. You got to go by the actions.
And so the actions are, on multiple occasions, Israel has offered the Palestinians statehood, the most recently being the Trump plan. Before the Trump plan, Ehud Olmert.
None of these are acceptable, man, to a people that have been displaced.
So like, what wasn't acceptable about Olmert? What was the Olmert plan? What wasn't acceptable about that?
Olmert was a lame duck president that was just throwing
but Abbas rejected the two-state solution.
Isn't the Olmert plan is the one where that guy, it's often quoted that defense minister says, like, if it had been offered to him, he wouldn't have taken it either, right? That's the Olmert plan?
No, that's not. No, the Olmert plan was...
That was the Barak plan? That was the Camp David plan?
Camp David, yeah.
Give me.
Olmert was all of the West Bank with minor border swaps. So Gush Etzion, but minor. And then the Arabs would get more land in return to the south west of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. The Holy Basin and the Holy Sites, the Old City, to be under the custodianship of the Palestinians, the Israelis, the Americans, the Jordanians, and the Saudis. The East Jerusalem to be the capital of Palestine. Basically, everything, a bridge between Gaza and the West Bank. A map was produced.
Air rights?
I'm not sure if that was discussed.
Water rights?
Well, no, they would have water rights.
Ability to have a defense force?
Okay. What?
So
what you're saying?
It's not.
So Israel has to give.
Israel
has to give them a military.
If the tables were turned, would Israel ever accept any of the plans?
So you're saying the only acceptable two-state solution would be for Israel to give them. You don't accept a two-state solution.
No, man, I'm a humanist. I think there should be democracy everywhere on earth. Come on, man. Read.
Well, there is democracy. There's democracy in Israel. There's a law. The Palestinians have a law that bans Jews of citizenship.
The only people that disagree with you is the same people that teach you about the human rights in North Korea, teach you about the human rights in Iran. I'm sure you read the same reports as I do and make judgments based on those reports.
Do you want to know the difference between me and you in this instance? I'm living here and observing it with my own eyes.
While I recognize that that's true, you're also like in America.
Do you think
in America, if I'm a patriot, if I'm a MAGA guy, and I'm surrounded by propaganda, I'm also saying racism doesn't exist in America.
So here's my litmus
racism exists in America. Do you think racism exists in America?
I think racism exists everywhere.
Okay, do you think there's systemic racism in America where Black people are over-policed, marginalized, overrepresented in prison populations, underrepresented in industries?
I think if we opened up this, it would be another argument of disagreement.
But if you don't, that's fine. But I strongly believe that there's systemic racism in America, but there's plenty of people here that would say, no, it's hunky-dory. Your perspective is the product, it's the product of your cultural environment as much as my perspective.
What's my cultural environment? I was raised on Marx and Engels in a socialist household.
And now you're a YouTuber that defends Zionism, right? So it's like you have a particular angle that is like.
But what's that got to do with racism in America?
Because it has to do this. It has to do with this, right?
All this happened is I've rejected.
If I can trust Amnesty International when it talks about Iran, one of the most pariah states in the world, right, under sanctions for 50 years, where right now nobody's complaining that Iran is getting bombed, right? Oh, they're getting bombed. Nobody gives a fuck, right? And yet I'm willing to trust Amnesty International to make an objective assessment of their democratic rights and human rights. I can't believe that I can't trust them to make an objective assessment.
Okay, so
and Amnesty International says very clearly, as does Human Rights Watch, that apartheid exists in the pre-1967 border.
What was happening in 2012? Next door to Israel, Syrian civil war. Yeah,
some hard ass shit.
one of the bloodiest. What do you think got mentioned more in Amnesty International's annual report? There were less than 100, well, way less than 100 people killed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that year.
Do you know what the difference is between a civil war and a state that is practicing violence against the people under its control? Like when Amnesty International is making a report of a country's civil rights situation, right? It's obviously going to make an exception if that country is at war, and that's not the same thing as a country that is doing it under the auspices of calling itself democratic.
Sorry. So you're now saying that Amnesty International is justified in 2012, I think maybe 2013 as well, focusing much more on Israel, which has a much smaller death, like casualty, death toll, than the Syrian, where you're literally talking over 100,000 people killed in Syria.
I think there's a big difference when we think about what is Amnesty International trying to do, right? Like what is its mission, right? Obviously, it's anti-war. Obviously, it recognizes that there's strife in these places. It's there for countries to put pressure on other countries to help uplift the human rights situations in those countries. The only way that it can advocate for the resolution of human rights issues in Syria is to advocate for the intervention of a country militarily in that context. They're not going to do that right now. Do I think it's fair?
So then, by that definition, by that same logic, do you think
it's fair? I don't think it's fair.
No, I just want you to follow through what you're saying. By that same definition, there should be no coverage of the Israel-Gaza war because that's a war. Do you think it was covered in the annual report?
I don't know. Was it?
Of course it was. You don't play dumb. You know that Amnesty International have talked about nothing but Israel-Gaza since October the 7th.
But listen, okay, listen.
Amnesty International panders to their donors. Amnesty International, bear with me. Amnesty International panders to their donors. When they took money from us, I think it was Saudi, they agreed not to cover LGBT rights in Saudi Arabia. Amnesty International knows, like every media organization knows, that if they focus on the Israel-Palestinian conflict, it equates to dollars. Huge sums of money will flow into them. They will get huge publicity. The same with media companies. Why make the conclusions
that they make? Like, you think that also drives them to say things which are false?
I think they're deeply anti-Semitic. I think Amnesty International, like most on the left,
do you think there's any organization in the world that could make a fair assessment? Objective. So it can't be Israeli tinged. It has to be an objective, legit objective assessment of what the conditions are.
Actually, I will be candid. I actually think it's almost impossible these days to be neutral on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I don't think it exists. I think you have huge biases and you're trying your hardest to be neutral. I have huge biases. I try to be neutral. I think if you're any media... I'll give you an example. I'm a content creator. If I put out a positive video, 10,000 people will watch it. I'm lucky, 1,000 people will watch it. If I put out a negative video, 1 million people will watch it. All my biggest videos, which go into like 10 million, it's negative. It's
nobody's going to watch this one.
No, they won't. No one will be watching it. If you're still watching it, let us know in the comments below. I'll be amazed if anyone's got this far.
But would you disagree with some of the conclusions that they say? Like, I just pulled it up. So, like, Human Rights Watch says that there's a two-tiered citizenship structure. In Israel, which the vast majority of nations consider to be the area defined by its pre-1967 borders, the two-tiered citizenship structure and bifurcation of nationality and citizenship result in Palestinian citizens.
Absolutely disagree. Okay, prove it. Show me. Argue the case and I'll debunk it.
While they have the right to vote and stand in Israeli elections, these rights do not empower them to overcome the institutional discrimination they face from the same Israeli government, including widespread restrictions on accessing land confiscated from them, home demolitions, and effective prohibitions on family reunification. Across these areas and in most aspects of life, Israeli authorities methodically
slow down, because you're jumping one by go. So family reunification. What's meant by family reunification?
My sister's in the West Bank. Can she become an Israeli citizen?
Yeah, perfect. And so absolutely so that's described. No, she can't. Absolutely. Yeah. Why?
My sister. Okay, my sister.
Can I become a Palestinian?
Lives in Romania, and she's a Romanian citizen. Can she become an Israeli citizen?
So let me explain. Literally, this is an ethno-religious conflict where demographics are everything. Would you agree demographics are...
I would say that's a humanist nightmare, right? To say demographics are everything, to me, is like it could justify eugenics, it could justify displacement.
Demographics Okay, so just simple terms. You've got ISIS. they become a demographic majority in the USA. Is that a good thing for you or a bad thing for you?
No, probably pretty bad. But am I going to?
Yeah. Okay.
Do I know they're ISIS? First of all, do I know they're ISIS?
So
I know they're ISIS, and I'm approving their immigration status.
Polling tells you overwhelmingly. History tells you overwhelmingly that that's the case. What happened on October the 7th?
A huge human rights. I mean, a huge war crime, a massacre, one of the most hideous things that I could ever imagine.
What was the reaction? What was the reaction of Arabs in the West Bank in Judea and Samaria in reaction to that? Which political party soared in popularity?
Listen, the same reaction, right? That like a Korean might have felt at the annihilation of the Japanese.
82% of Arabs in the West Bank supported October the 7th in polling by Palestinian research, by the Palestinian Survey and Research Center.
I don't want to say that I support their supporting that, right? But I do think if the poll included, would you have supported any other means, right, that would achieve the similar amount of pressure? I'm sure they all would have said yes, right? The only reason is because they'd have no other means.
I'm saying, is it unreasonable? Is it unreasonable for Israeli not to admit citizens that agree overwhelmingly with the rape and slaughter of its citizens?
It is. Listen, I'm gonna go this. It's 2025.
No.
It's unreasonable that sister gets to move in. It's 2000. It's unreasonable that sister gets to go in. Yeah, it's Intifada. It's unreasonable that she gets going. Okay, first Intifada. Okay, it's 1965. Like, if you keep going back, they're never going to let the people in. It's not because
they're not. That's the whole. That was the whole purpose of a two-state.
It's demographics.
That was the whole purpose of a two-state solution. And so it's beautiful for you to sit there. You can sit there in your ivory tower in. New York. Probably. But a basement in where do all the rich people live?
Upper East Side or something? I don't know, Williamsburg.
In your basement there. I mean, your basement there is probably worth $3-4 million.
Not even close, dude. Not even close. Okay, I wish we'll get there.
10 million.
Gentrifying.
The point I'm making is Amnesty International.
Thank you for indulging me, man. I'm sorry.
Amnesty International is framing that as apartheid. Yeah, in reality, none of the context is taken into consideration. That you have a population which overwhelmingly supported the genocide. Like, literally, they went in and slaughtered over 1,000. I don't like to use the word genocide. I'm not going to do what they do. The massacre.
But you know what I mean. But if they were offered any other, if you say Palestinian resistance has one form, it is the massacre of children and innocents, etc. The other option is the surrender of your Palestinian nationhood. Those are the two options. They would say, fucking kill the children. As would the Israelis, as would the Zionists. If the Zionists if the Zionists were up against the God, right, and they were given two choices for their existential survival. Either kill or be disappeared as a nation, because your enemies are saying there's no such thing as an Israeli. They're saying there's no such thing as Israel. Jews, they come from somewhere else. They need to go home. If they're saying that, and you guys have two choices, right? Either leave and disappear or accept the massacre of people. I would certainly be very upset to hear the Jews say we will accept the massacre of the people, but I would also understand that in a desperate existential situation, they might choose that. Now, what I want to hear from a sincere pollster is ask them if there was some other way you could get Israelis to the negotiating table, if there was some other way that you could alleviate the terrible situation in Gaza, if there was some other way that you could push for Palestinian nationhood, would you choose that instead of the massacre of the babies? You know, and I know that all of them would say we would choose that first, because Hamas was not the first option of Palestinian resistance, right? Like, Palestinian resistance has had many versions, and the Intifada and Barghouti and all these people, their first desire was labor resistance, strike, peaceful resistance, and all that stuff, right? This stuff was suppressed violently, right?
Your historical revisionism is just crazy. Izzeddin al-Qassam in the 1930s got a fatwa from Sheikh Hassan in Syria to set up the proto-ISIS terrorist cells that could slaughter Jews. This is in the 1930s. They set up 5-man teams that would go in and butcher Jews wherever they found them. And so this is why Hamas call it the Al-Qassam Brigades. The Qassam missile, all named after Izzeddin Al-Qassam. His organization was Al-Kaf al-Aswad.
Wait, what year was this? 1930 when?
1930s, the beginning of the night, probably from 1930. I mean, he was active before then, but
he was martyred, right? He's like a guy that was martyred in in the fight, right?
Yeah, but what I want to do, I want to come back to what you were saying. You were saying like this existential threat, the poor Palestinian, the West Bank. This is a small house. I could show you much big, but I've only got this one on camera. I'll show you a Rawabi afterwards. This is one of.
Some of them, the rich live nicely.
I'm saying that the Palestinians live nicely. I drive through
but I could take some pictures from the Jewish ghettos in Warsaw.
No, you could. This is absolute.
Some of them are living really nice stuff on the walls.
No, I'm sorry. What you're saying is a disgrace to your people. Disgrace to your people. I've been very, very kind to you.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to disgrace my people.
I'm sorry.
Okay?
But I drive these roads. I drive. No. I drive these roads. I drive an old 10 year, let's not get hyperbolic. I drive a 10-year-old Peugeot. It's not worth much money. Whenever I'm driving through the roads in Judea and Samaria, I'm overtaken by Palestinians every single time. Hundreds of them in brand new Range Rovers, brand new BMWs, brand new Mercedes. You go to any village, you'll find a villa like the one I've just shown you. You go to places like Termus Aya, you'll find entire cities, or certainly towns, with just filled with beautiful luxury villas. Here's my challenge to you, because I do it every time. When you connect with a Palestinian here, just ask, what car does either he or his parents drive?
Okay.
And ask what year is it, and you'll get blown away by the answer.
But hold up a second. There might be a slight self-selection happen here. It's like when I used to see during the war, I'd see these streamers from Gaza, right?
Yeah.
And they'd be in cars too. I mean, they're in cars in Gaza. There was this beautiful little girl who used to cook, right? And she would cook, in a makeshift stove and stuff like that. But you could tell, like, she must come from one of the richest families in Gaza because she seems to have access to video editing technology and all these things, right? We are seeing a bit of a filtered version of Gaza here. The poorest Gazans they don't have internet access, the poorest Gazans, right? Like, they're not necessarily broadcasting in the same way. So I will grant you that as far as concentration camps go, right? Like, Gaza has a lot of nice perks for some of the people there, right? Like, I admit, like some of them are.
I mean, you use just such
but the
disgusting
Palestinians
language.
are facing an existential crisis. Would you deny that they're facing an existential crisis when there's plenty of people in the current government of Israel that talk about eradicating them completely? When it's Amalek talk and all that stuff.
No, so again, this just shows
that
ignorance of Jewish culture. Amalek is mentioned, the same verse is mentioned on the Hague. Amalek is used in Jewish language if you were more connected with your ancestors.
Let's set Amalek aside. Who would be the equivalent of a Ben Gvir in Palestinian politics? Like,
are you joking?
Like, who would be the equivalent? Like a radical.
Ben Gvir would be that would be Mahmoud Abbas. That would be the moderates. Their extremists say wherever you find Jews in the world, slice their throats.
Okay, and so
is Ben Gvir telling Jews to go and slaughter Muslims wherever you find them?
Israelis believe, and you say they rightfully believed, that giving the state to Palestinians, considering that's how Palestinians feel about Israel, would be a very dangerous thing.
I'm against a two-state solution.
For 80 years with a neighbor, right, that has those views about them, that they're going to be eradicated from the land eventually, right? The Likudniks have been saying from the river to the sea since the founding of the party. No violence.
Just so you get this is Rawabi. I've just been looking through it.
Don't show me violence, okay?
No, I don't show violence. I show nice buildings. I show luxury. There's a brand new $1 billion city built by a man called Al-Masri, the Egyptian.
Where's his money come from?
He made money. He's an international businessman.
You mean he's got family abroad that sends him money? What do you mean he's an international businessman?
No, he owns businesses in the Arab world. He's made. I can't remember all his businesses, but he's Palestinians can do business as well. I don't know what perception you have.
Send money home also, right? It's like a lot of Palestinians get money because Palestinian diaspora people send money home.
No, this is just propaganda. The Palestinian economy is twofold. There's huge money flows in from charity overseas, USA and Europe flows in, and that goes into construction projects. So if you go to somewhere like Bethlehem, actually, if you go in areas like in the border of Area B and Area C, 70% of the construction that the Arabs are building is empty. They're building, you drive around Bethlehem, you just see tower block after tower block with nobody in them. And this money's flowing in from Europe. They then build and build and build. And that's one form. The other side is the Israeli economy. There's a lot of Palestinians make good money working in Israel. And so I'd say they're the two major areas. And then afterwards, you've got things like agriculture and stuff, but that seems to be much smaller. Construction is huge. Charity is huge. And business with Israel is huge. They're not getting pocket money sent from rich Americans. You do have rich Americans. You do have a rich diaspora community. They tend to build a house in Torah Messiah, like the place I mentioned. But that's not who's driving around in the BMWs and the Range Rovers. These are Palestinians who have money.
Right.
If you go to Ramallah, it's like any modern city.
If you take the richest Palestinians and compare them with the richest Israelis, how do they fare?
Well, they're poorer. I mean, Israel's doing better than America at the moment.
Poorest Israelis and the poorest Palestinians, how do they fare?
Probably comparable.
Oh, really? And who are the poorest Israelis?
Haredi Jews. No, Orthodox Jews.
Jews are poorer than the 48ers?
Yes.
Okay, I guess if we can go back to that massacre in the 30s, right? Like, and we can imagine the perspective of people there locally who had known Jews their whole lives, right? Had known Jewish people living in that land. Their grandparents maybe knew Jews, had Jews over for tea and stuff like that. But then all these Jews that suddenly, they look different, right? They look different.
You're just creating a reality. This is not reality. Okay.
Bear with me. Just bear with me.
Okay, and then I'll paint the made-up Palestinian picture of them, like,
that's fine.
drinking our blood
I will give
from
you the
wine
courtesy.
glasses.
If there's things about my picture that are totally bullshit, I do want you to bring them to surface because I'd hate saying something ignorant to you and then having to say something ignorant to somebody else. I want my ignorance to stop here, you know? So my sense is that, like, the first people that came to settle and stuff like that were Europeans, right? It wasn't Yemeni Jews. It wasn't like Baghdadi Jews. They were European Jews.
No. So, like...
Tell me.
So for instance, the
like by 1930, if it's 1930 and we're looking at the Jewish influx, we're seeing an influx that is mostly European, correct?
I would agree that the majority, but you absolutely have Jews coming from the Middle East and North Africa. So for instance,
do we give it a majority? Is it like 60-40 or is it like 80-20?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna imagine from my layman understanding, and perhaps I'm wrong. In the video, people can comment. You have to send me a link, by the way, to who you are, and like send me.
I'll do that now in case we get disconnected. So it's not fair. If you type this into YouTube, you'll find me.
Are you famous?
Israel advocacy. Not famous. I've got like.
Am I gonna be famous?
No, this video will get. I predict this video will get 15,000 views, so it will be okay. It's a long one.
It's gonna be you taking like little clips where I'm like Hitler was right or something.
No, yeah. If I clip, they get 1 million views. So let's pray I don't clip.
So like let's just imagine like yes, I'm an Arab, perhaps a leader, perhaps even religious leader and stuff like that. I believe Jerusalem is it's like our holy land or whatever, and I have these strong feelings. But there have been Jews here forever. I'm not sure if they've been praying at the Western Wall since before, or if that's something that came about.
Salahuddin said that was the place where Jews were allowed to pray. They used to pray either on the Temple Mount or at the gates of the Temple Mount.
So so we've coexisted with Jews and stuff like that. There've been bouts of anti-Semitic violence, but I know Jews all my life. I've known Jews all my life. They speak Arabic, right? They speak Arabic to me in the streets. We greet each other with salam or whatever. Like we're speaking.
No, they're not allowed to. La tabdu al yahud wa la an nasara bis salam. You're not allowed to greet the Jew or the Christian with peace. That's
really? Oh, good. I say it all the time to everybody who's Muslim here.
Yeah, but most Muslims you speak on here won't know it's Sahih Muslim. If they say wa alaikum,
they're okay with it. I'm going to assume.
Watch what they say. If they say wa alaikum or wa alaik instead of wa alaikum assalam, they are aware of the discrimination. But anyway,
okay. I'll pay attention to it. No, I hate to be insulting people with their culture by presuming.
No, bro, you're not the one insulting in that instance. Basically, they're saying you're not allowed to greet a Jew or Muslim a Jew or Christian with peace. They're the one that's being discriminatory there. You're not causing anyone offense by wishing peace on them. You shouldn't.
Okay. So let's say yes, it's 1930, and what I'm seeing now is a different kind of Jew, right? Like they don't look like the Jews that speak Arabic. I can't even speak to them anymore. They're speaking a foreign language, and they look very different, right? Like
What year are you saying this is
this
1930?
yeah, because I'm trying to get the context for that guy, that the Qassam guy, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to just figure out, like, yeah, it's 1930. What is he seeing that makes him trigger such violent reaction to Jews that he would advocate for killing them en masse and stuff like that, right? And trust me, man, like if it sounds like a justification for murder, like I swear to God, like make me eat my words. Like I don't want to be justifying murder. I'm just trying to say, like, what is the context here? And if the context is one where like we are native to this people, to this land, and all of a sudden these people that speak a foreign language don't seemingly have a connection to the land, have very different customs than the Jews that we're accustomed to, have very different clothing, and they have been participating in like some of the displacement that's been happening to some of the peasantry, creating a little bit of the conflict with these people. Maybe some Bedouin trade routes have been upset or something, or some local grazing lands are no longer available, and people are starting to show discontent and stuff like that. And then I get wind of what the Zionist project is, that there will be many more to come, many more to come, potentially hundreds of thousands to come. And I'm only 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. Wouldn't that inspire a little bit of fear and panic about, like, even if they mean well, even if they say they want to help us, that we might never have a chance in this land to have our self-determination, and our, if it's religious, to have our religious control over the holy city and stuff like that? Wouldn't it seem like a threat to them over something that they may have felt entitled to, which is the place where they had been all this time?
Okay. So my answer is I'm going to turn the clock back a little bit earlier.
Okay.
In the 1700s.
You brought up 1930, just so you know. I was
Yeah,
trying
no,
to.
I'm going to tie it back to this 100% coming to 1930. In the 1700s, Jews are the majority population, according to Adrian Rayland, who's documenting the populations of the Holy Land. They're the majority population of Jerusalem. In 1844,
Hey, really? Really?
In
Wow.
1844, Caesar Famine, who I think went on to become the French consul, he reports that there are 8,000 Jews, 4,000 Christians, and 4,000 Muslims in Jerusalem. So Jews are the majority, and the same population as the combined Christian and Muslim populations. Now, the majority of these Jews, certainly by 1844, are the old Yishuv. They are Ashkenazim and not Mizrahim. They're not Arabic speaking, they're Yiddish speaking Jews.
Thought they'd be Sephardic speak. They'd be Ladino
No,
speaking.
they're not. They're not Ladino. Ladino was very, very minimally spoken. So no, these are Jews.
And are we
Many of
talking
them are
about what
followers
year
of
did you say? When?
1844, 1850s, 1860s,
It's
1870.
mostly Ashkenazim
Yeah,
that are
they're the
in.
majority. There's two communities. If you ever see the clothing, that there's certain Hasidic groups in Jerusalem that wear the stripes on Shabbat, and the Ashkenazim, they came over. They're followers of the Vilna Gaon, or following from. They followed followers of him out here, and they adopted for tax purposes the clothing of the Sephardim who wore striped garden. They tried to make themselves look Sephardic. So there were Sephardim here. There were Sephardic shuls and synagogues, but the majority population were Ashkenazim. They were European Jews. So by 1930s, I mean, if a Muslim or a Christian knows a Jew, it's far more likely that they, from a statistical perspective, maybe not cultural, but statistical, that they would be of Ashkenazi descent. So they would have descended from Jews
How
from
are they
Europe.
talking to each other?
They would have been talking in. So Israel's a very interesting case. So the Jews that lived in the land earlier, it's one of the few places where Hebrew was the spoken tongue. Most places, Hebrew wasn't the spoken tongue. By the 1800s, the language would have overwhelmingly been Yiddish.
Wow, I didn't know that at all.
Um,
But let's say that then now they're used to this small population of relatively not assimilated, but like a cultured
What you
local.
could say, you could say there was a difference. So these are religious Jews. They would have looked in more traditional Orthodox clothing, black and white, fur hats, the kind of stuff you're used to seeing Haredi or ultra Orthodox Jews wearing. Albeit there would have been more variation back then. It's much more
This is like,
homogenous now.
sorry, just doing a brief. This
1800s.
is like Moses Montefiore. These are people that are being backed
So
by
Moses Montefiore
Luca.
would have been giving them money. When
Right.
they're sending money to impoverished Jews in Jerusalem, this is who it's going to.
Yeah.
But then what you'll see the Zionist movement, which will have brought a different type of European Jew. So
But even that is a demographic shift. And again, like I don't want to.
I'm trying to steel man you here. So I'm trying to say, so if you wanted to make the case you're making, you could say there was a different type of Jew, and that what they would have saw a flurry of activity which didn't exist with the religious Jews. With the religious Jews, they were content. They lived in their houses. They lived in abject poverty. They went to the synagogue. They went to the study hall. They went to the Western Wall, and that was their life. With the Zionists that were coming in, they were purchasing land, as you said. They were building infrastructure, establishing kibbutzim, engaging in agriculture, and it would have been a very different existence. But here's the flaw in your argument. The flaw is the man. The flaw is Izzeddin al-Qassam. He's a Syrian. He's basically from the school that gave birth to the Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan Muslimin, which ultimately gave birth to Hamas. This is all a continuous chain of ideology. He's a religious fundamentalist. He's not motivated by nationalism. He's motivated by religious fundamentalism and the view that the Jew is theologically beneath the Muslim. We're what's called al-Khitab. We are the people of the book, which means we're one of the Dhimma. We should be a Dhimmi, and as you mentioned it before, Dhimmitude. We should be in a state of disgrace, and we should be paying the jizya until we're sagirun, until we're humbled, humiliated. And these pompous, arrogant, upstart Zionist Jews aren't accepting that reality. In fact, they're nationalists, and he's in opposition to that. He's not a nationalist, he's a religious fundamentalist, he's a jihadi. He's no different to Daesh, which ISIS. He's the same. And so the motivation isn't, I don't understand what this Jew is saying, or this Jew has evicted an Arab family who I'm related to. His motivation is, this is a nationalist project on Islamic land. It's purely religious. This conflict is a religious conflict. It's not a nationalist project. It's not a nationalist conflict. The reason why there's so much interest in it internationally is because of religion. The reason why you've had more people killed in Al-Fashir in Sudan in 10 days than in 2 years in Gaza, and nobody even knows there's a war going on in Sudan, never mind in 10 days they killed more people, is because Jerusalem, Masjid al-Aqsa, the Temple Mount.
You don't think? But why?
Conflict.
Then why Ukraine? Why do we know about Ukraine?
We know about Ukraine because it's Russia and NATO.
So that might also be the reason why we care so much about Israel, not Sudan, because like we care about the countries that seem like they're close.
Israel's not part of NATO.
No, I know, but I'm saying like the reason that we don't care about Sudan is because the West is racist and doesn't care about black people killing black people, right? It's like the reason that we care about Ukraine is because
Israel is the most. Israel is the most
because it also feels relevant in a way.
No, Israel is
power.
No, it's got nothing to do with American power. Israel is the most covered conflict since World War II. It dominates everything. It dominates every human rights organization. It's the only organization that the UN will meet regularly at fixed intervals every year to discuss one country, even at times of peace. In 10 years before October the 7th, the United Nations had issued more critical resolutions against Israel than the rest of the world combined. There's an obsession, and it's because of your granddad. He was Jewish. He was Jewish. No. I'm saying the obsession is because we're Jews. The obsession is this is anti-Semitism. Old habits die hard, and
but there are places where sometimes you can have a religious prohibition on something, and then also without the religious prohibition, it's also a bad idea, right? Like let's say it's not. The fact that there's a religious opposition to the development of a nation in the land of Palestine that is Jewish majority might have been articulated in religious terms by Qassam, but if I remove it, I still think it's a valid thing, right? if
Why
he
did
just
the
read
Muslim?
Jabotinsky, if he just read anybody by 1930, like even if he didn't believe that the Holy Land should be a Muslim protectorate or whatever, like he would still say like, let's fight this thing with all
Why
our might.
why didn't he fight Abdullah?
That's a good question. I would imagine because Abdullah
Abdullah was
looked
Muslim.
looked and sounded like him because he was a
Yeah.
racist. You know,
And why did he fight the Jews? Because the Jews were the Jews. The Jews are supposed to be under the
they may have, but
Muslims.
it also may have been because they were Europeans. He might have felt differently if they were
No,
Yemen.
it's not that the Europeans.
You
It's
think if
that
they
the
were all
Jews read
Baghdadi Jews, he would have done the same thing? If they were all
read
Arabic Baghdadi?
at the heart of this conflict. I can't emphasize this enough. Is religion. Religion.
I wish you wouldn't say that. I don't believe it. I really don't believe it. I think at the heart of this conflict is land ownership. You know,
Yeah, I
and
know because you're a
religion,
Marxist
religion drives
materialist.
the hottest parts of each side. But I think like
Okay, I'll go even further. The heart of this, the real heart of this problem is Islam. Islam cannot tolerate. That's why there are no minority states in the Middle East.
Judaism can't either, right? Because if the restoration of the Jewish people,
this is the point. Judaism, when we had the religiously, not that Israel's a religious nation, but if it were, when we had the Beit HaMikdash, there was a gallery for the rest of the nations. Israel, from its inception, has protected its minority populations. Israel is the only place where groups like the Baha'i, the Druze, etc., have complete equality and freedom.
they didn't protect the Yemeni children. Like, what do you mean? They didn't even protect the minority Jews. The Beta Israel.
What do you mean that? What?
Didn't they take a bunch of Yemeni children and place them in Ashkenazi homes?
So one of the most shameful practices of Ashkenaz. Allow me to finish. Shameful practices of Ashkenazim. I am Ashkenazi Jew. Is they help and save Jews. They saved the Yemeni Jews, and then they did. There was a war going on. Ibn Saud. Anyway, there was a.
Yeah, it's just what a convenient time. What a convenient time for conflict.
They say so.
Just when we needed those people the most.
Have you spoke to any Yemeni Jews?
Yeah, listen, they're very happy to be in Israel and stuff like that. Like, there's no doubt about it.
But what I was going to say, I was going to build on your. I was going to try and add to your argument. So Ashkenazim. So take a group like Satmar. Satmar are Haredi anti-Zionist Jews. They also help rescue Jews from Yemen. And when they moved them to their community, they, in helping them, kind of eradicated a lot of their culture, which is a great shame because this is an ancient civilization. The way they pronounce Hebrew is probably the closest to the Gaonic period. So it's a beautiful, beautiful community, beautiful culture. And it was erased, and just like Chabad and other organizations, they Ashkenazified, and they erased what's beautiful in that culture. It was the same with the socialists. It was the same with the socialists. But the motivation there is to help. So they rescued, but then in rescuing, they intentionally or accidentally erase beautiful aspects of their culture just because of the nature of they're now in America and not in Yemen. Or in the case of the socialists, they believe they're helping them, they believe they're secular. And obviously the states pushed back and never really agreed to this. But I'm going to side with the Yemenis because I love the Yemenis. They're my people, the Tamanim.
But realistically...
But what I was going to say is that the motivation is not, as you were saying, to kidnap. When the Muslims kidnap Jewish girls and marry them off as children to old men, that's not rescuing. That's evil.
Definitely. No, totally. Yeah.
Although
maybe from their point of view, they're rescuing them from a life of being like an infidel or something. I don't know.
Okay, I'm not a moral relativist. What they do is evil.
Not gonna justify it at
but
all.
What I'm saying with the motivation of the socialist secular Zionists. So I'm a religious Zionist. I believe in religion. Their objective was to help and do good. If what's accused of them actually took place, and there's a big pushback that ever happened. But if they did, it was because they wanted to uplift them. Now, I disagree. If it happened, it's a disgrace, but it's not as you deframed it. It's not kidnapping. It's not evil. It's
no. But it's certainly like when you say like Israel's the only country that protects its minorities, I'd say like, oh, that's funny because in certain situations they wouldn't even protect the Jewish minority.
It's an instance,
as you know, I'm sure you know, that like what is happening now in Israel of the prevalence of Mizrahi in all forms of government and stuff like that, right? That their power, the political power and their cultural relevance and the intermingling of Mizrahi and Ashkenazi Jews has changed the dynamic that existed in the beginning, which
But
was
that's by
slightly
design.
slightly
No.
discriminatory.
This is what you're getting at. That's by design. The reason that is such intermixing and intermingling is because that's the way the state was designed.
While I understand that the state may have been designed that way, up until that point happened, if you went and you took a sample of the political class or a sample of the academic leaders or a sample of the
But that's
officers
a
in
very
the military,
simple explanation.
right? The officers in the military.
What's the
all these
explanation for that? What's the simple explanation for that?
that Ashkenazi look out for each other and like
No, that's the dumb take. You're a clever man.
Tell me. I don't know.
Where are the Europeans coming from? These European early Zionists, they're the leaders. They're coming from the best European universities. They're coming from very affluent families. The majority of, say, a North African community and the Ethiopian community, they're coming from a much less, in terms of education and material wealth, a much
so they're going to take time to
place.
catch up. What you're saying is that they need to take some time.
And the
to catch
state
up.
was designed in a way.
Egalitarian.
The state's been designed in a way so that those minorities can catch up, and everyone goes through the same education
I'll
system.
grant you that, man. I don't want to. Again, you know significantly more than I do. You live it, etc. And I'm sure you don't feel like people are
one of the things I encourage, like, is you when you talk about Ethiopian Jews, Yemeni Jews, what I encourage anybody, particularly someone like you, who will be able to access people on this app. You're a nice guy. You're easy to talk to. Speak to Ethiopian Jews, speak to Yemeni Jews, ask them their lived experience and their understanding of their historical experience in the land. And you'll get honest answers, and it will be a million miles from the Al Jazeera hit piece, but it also won't be the romanticized...
All right, can I ask a dangerous, perhaps hypothetical to consider, but you recognize that the Jews that lived in the Middle East were living under persecution and second-class citizenship for their entire existence as Jews in exile, like 100%. Neither you and I are defending it, supporting it. We all agree this is a terrible, terrible thing. But in this condition, they did develop very unique cultural attributes, right? Like they developed things that were very relevant to their local cultures in terms of styles of dress, styles of song, other forms of cultural fucking, traits that I'm not even thinking of necessarily, accents, dialects, methods of prayer and things like that were very localized, right? And it's certainly true that just because of the way institutions work in Israel, there is a little bit of an Ashkenazification of the culture, which is that there's a degree of assimilation where people that would have normally worn jabaliyas don't wear jabaliyas. They wear Polish clothing, right? They wear
No. Think the easiest one. Think culinary. What food do you think of when you think of Israel?
But let me make the two exceptions, right? Because I do think Mizrahis, they lead culture, right? They lead the music. They lead the, they have an enormous place of cultural prominence. I'm not going to say that, but I do believe that their expulsion from these ancestral lands of Jews resulted to some degree in the death of a local culture. Would you disagree with that?
So death of which local culture?
Like let's say Yemeni Jews.
So I would say
I know. Haven't survived.
It's the culture. The culture of Israel is overwhelmingly Middle Eastern rather than Ashkenazi. Where I would cede ground to you is religiously. One of the greatest shames of, and I'm speaking ill of my brothers now, of the Ashkenaz and the Mizrachim has been the inability of Mizrahi Jews to withstand the pressure of the Ashkenazi religious world. So when you look at an ultra-Orthodox Yemeni Jew today, he's wearing a black hat and a white shirt and a black jacket.
Yes.
So I would cede ground to you on religious, but religion only.
Only on religion. What about in dialect? I mean, they're not speaking their own languages.
They're not speaking Yiddish.
What?
They're not speaking Yiddish.
But they're speaking modern Hebrew, right? And they're not speaking.
Yeah, which is a combination of, as you identified.
The loss of what language were they speaking in Yemen?
So some would speak Hebrew, some would speak Arabic. It depends on.
And as you said, their Hebrew pronunciation was very unique and had a connection that was ancestral.
The Ashkenazi Hebrew pronunciation. So I'll give you an example. In Ashkenaz, you would say Good Shabbos for a good Sabbath.
Mhm.
In Yemen, it would
That's
be
Yiddish, or that.
Good Shabbos is Yiddish.
Yeah.
But even the
Hmm.
Shabbat,
Hmm.
Shabboth,
Hmm.
Shabboth would be Yemen. Shabbat would be, say, Mizrahi, North African. Um, Shabbos,
Hmm.
Shabbos would be Ashkenaz. So
Hmm.
the languages, the Hebrew that's been adopted is much closer to the Mizrahi pronunciation than the Ashkenaz pronunciation, because they wanted it to be what they believe will be more authentic,
Hmm.
and they believe that was a more authentic pronunciation. They should have gone Yemeni. It's even more. But no, I don't think. I think you're. Have you visited Israel?
When I was a little kid.
I recommend coming here because I think your perception is a million miles. No, come here. Go over the Green Line. Go to Ramallah. Go to Rawabi. Go to Nablus, Jenin. Go to Al Khalil, Hebron. Speak to the Arabs here. Speak to the Jews here. You have strong opinions. It's
Hmm.
easy to jump on a plane. Stop relying on people like me, relying on Al Jazeera to give you information. Come here, experience it. If you do experience it, message me on Instagram and I will take you to meet Palestinians. I will take you to meet wild, dangerous settlers. I will take you to meet lefties in Tel Aviv, and
Hmm.
you can talk about, you can sing the International. But
So you
seriously,
don't.
if
So you,
you
yeah, you would push back on the idea that Yemeni Yemenite Jewish culture has somehow, at least in its authentic form, like it no longer exists, and that Baghdadi Jewish culture in its authentic form no longer exists. Moroccan
but
authentic
Polish
identity, that
doesn't
these things have
either.
been sort of assimilated and flattened, and
No,
that
no.
and
So
that
what we're having is beautiful. So I'm going to give you now a religious drusha. This is a religious take on what's
yeah.
going on. Judaism is a religion. When I told you about how the sages package Judaism in a suitcase, we have this principle that you have to cleave to the traditions of your father. And
Mhm.
so you'll have one community that will eat beans on Passover, another community that don't. And you can't deviate. We're following the same law, but somehow some can eat beans, some can't.
Mhm.
And it's strictly cleaving to these traditions which kept us as a Jewish people in the diaspora, because
Mhm.
it's clinging on to that memory which preserved us. When we return and the Jews from the four corners of the earth gather and return to Israel, what preserved us then separates us. And so, why won't this person eat at my house on Passover? Like, what I'm cooking is kosher. And so, what you see is you find we become a homogenous, we become one people again. And the barriers that preserved us in exile, or the traditions that preserved us in exile, act as barriers when we're living together. And so it all melds into one. And you described that perfectly when you said that Ashkenazim are marrying Mizrachim, Mizrachim are marrying Ashkenazim. Many Israelis really struggle to know, am I Ashkenazi, am I Mizrahi? Because I'm the product of Jews from around the world. Like they always do the thing like, this grandparent was from here, this grandparent was from here, this,
Mhm.
and so what you're finding is all of those walls are coming down, and we're re-emerging as one people again, just as we were when we used to live in ancient Israel. And so
Mhm.
I think religiously it's by design. What preserved us divides us when we return, and so we have to tear down those divisions. And
Mhm.
you see and I also see the beauty in those divisions. But
Yeah.
it's a natural evolution of the Jewish people once we're reunited and living together.
If we remove that dimension, which I agree, it is quite beautiful and poetic and lovely, this kind of like the people coming back together after so many years apart and getting to share and see
Yeah.
each other. How did you figure out Jewishness away from home? Like there's something quite lovely about that. But do you think that just considering the history of Jews in those lands, that if it hadn't been for the state of Israel, they would have survived. Not happy, not first class citizenship, maybe ever, maybe still now, they might still be living in some sort of second class citizenship, but that they would have survived in their lands. That culture would continue. Yemeni singing, right? Yemeni traditional Torah singing and stuff like that, incantations, whatever, like that would still be practiced in Yemen and stuff like that. Like, do you believe that that's the case, that if there had been no state of Israel, right, like that these communities may have still suffered persecution, but they would have been passing down every Passover, the same traditions. If they eat beans in this place, then they still eat beans on the Sabbath and stuff like that. Like, or do you just think like inevitably, all the Jews in the world would at some point be eradicated, destroyed completely? So, because for me, like I guess the point I'm trying to make, and we're gonna have to kind of end soon because I have to go, but like apart from what I think is the sort of the crime against my deep seated feelings of humanism, that all people should live in peace wherever they want, which is I think like one of the big problems with Zionism, is that to me it's sort of like it sort of goes against that kind of humanist idea, which I really believe. The other thing is that like it does seem to have coincided with the disappearance of a lot of really old traditional Jewish local communities, right? Like, and that to me, like that's one of the sad things about Zionism, is that it made these people who had enormous, it's like the Avi Shlaim kind of angle, right? Like that, like they had these really strong connections to the land, and it became inviable the moment that this state emerged that said, no, come here, this is where you belong, either implicitly because that was the message, or by design. We can argue about this.
So I've got a very maybe they survived, but my answer is very simple. Look at the condition of the Kurds. Look at the condition of the Druze. Look at the condition of the Yazidis. Look at the condition of all the Christians. Look at the condition of all the minority communities in this region. There are massacres, not on the Holocaust proportion, but there are massacres. That would be the everyday experience of the Jewish people. But what I was going to say is,
they'd survive.
Say there's until there's a major massacre, like of Holocaust proportions, and I think that Jewish history tells you it happens again and again, from the biblical narrative of Pharaoh and Egypt to the Inquisitions, the Crusades, the Holocaust, it's Christian, just waves of waves. Egyptian, but I can go to Al Mahadun. I can go to there's different periods I can go to.
But the scale is different always. The scale.
I agree. There's no argument there.
I think for me the sad thing is that the Jews ended up in the place that had been safest for them, but they made it the most dangerous place.
No, it had never been safest for them. The Jews in the Holy Land were regularly slaughtered.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I guess I always have to remember that I'm never saying safe. I just mean relative to a world where they.
It's people who paint history. What I would say is study Islamic history. There are different caliphate, and they treated the Jews very differently. It just depended on the caliphate and the leader. It changed massively. From the time of Muhammad to today, Jews are being slaughtered by Muslims.
And as we sort of agreed, if you had like a machine and it could transport you to any of the places under Muslim control or Christian control, but you couldn't figure out the date and time or place, it would make more sense to end up in a Muslim place because relatively they were.
You have one black eye instead of two. Yeah.
My friend, listen, I can only thank you so much because.
What's your name, by the way? I'm Joseph.
I'm in America. I can't dox myself because anti-Zionists
are
getting like jobs and stuff. But Joseph, you said?
Yeah.
Joseph, it's really a pleasure, man. You're so polite. You're so respectful. You're so knowledgeable. And there's so much hate on this website. The only reason I'm here is to talk to people like you who can have a long, engaging conversation where I learn a lot, and it's like, I do want to read Herzl's diary. I do have a very distorted picture of Herzl, and I do want to know more, especially if he's a socialist, because yay, socialism.
I mean, he was a socialist, is maybe a bit hyperbolic, but he definitely had some socialist ideas, let's say.
Listen, my pleasure, Joseph.
Amazing.
You take
it's
care.
It's been a pleasure talking.
I'll find the channel. You're saying I'm going to be on YouTube. Is that what you're saying? I'm going to be.
Bezrat Hashem, with help from God.
All right,
All right, brother. Take care.